super happy you're here. Start by acknowledging you see the territory that we're on, and then start next by inviting everyone to introduce themselves. So please, I know there's lots of things you could say about yourselves and about each other, but please, I'll ask you to share your name and maybe what you do here in the building. It'll be fantastic. So that'll get us started, and then we'll spend a bit of time doing this pre-briefing, kind of set the stage, get people prepared for what we're hoping to do this evening, and then we'll divide and conquer this patient case. Some people will go downstairs and start looking after this patient, and we're going to stream that and so you'll be able to watch it up here, and likewise switch after, and then all meet together in this room for one big debrief, and then we'll go home happy, ahead of schedule, under budget. So, hello, my name is Jared Abbey. I'm an emergency nurse by background, and I do simulation work these days. Super happy you guys are here. So, on that note, let me just sort of go around the room. So,
sure. So, Drew, I'm one of the emerge docs, and I do some sim on the side as well.
Do you want to do your housekeeping items right now?
Sure, just so I don't forget. One person you're going to get introduced to shortly is Sherry in the back. Sherry's going to be taking some photos tonight. So hopefully everyone's okay with having some photos. These aren't going to be shared widely. They're just going to be used like in Sims like kind of stuff. So maybe within the building we might have a couple photos up. They're not going to be posted like online or anything like that. But if you have any major concerns about that, then let us know.
And on that note, we're already filming and streaming. This is on YouTube as we speak. So likewise, if you have a concern about that, please let us know. We will be sure to edit you out.
That's actually not a joke, is actually.
Yeah.
The second thing is just a big thank you to Nemesis, I think is how they call themselves, the Nanaimo Medical Staff Association, as was supportive of this catering, so they paid for the catering tonight, so thank you to them for supporting making this happen. That's what it is. I don't know if
Fantastic.
I think that's all the kind of
Nice.
John Grabber, one of the emerge docs. Happy to be here. Goodbye, Gino, one of the herbs here.
Sky Kriva, one of the herbs here.
Mark Wigmore, herb. Super happy to be here.
Happy in the sky.
Kevin Smith, nurse in the emergency department. I do some facilitating sim as well, so it's fun.
Erica Slater, the trauma coordinator for Central and North Island.
Kathy Brown, an ICU RN and part of the SIM team in ICU.
Jeff Pinota, research paid for ICU in Floor 1. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm Anna McDonald. I'm the manager of the SIM team down in Victoria, and I'll be following everyone around tonight with the camera doing the live stream. Try not to get on the line.
I'm Sarah Hall from anesthesia.
Paul here from anesthesia. Aaron Sriel, the nurse educator for the operator.
Joni Litchfield, interim nurse educator for Emerge and SIM facilitator as well for our program.
I'm Candace Walker. I'm your material holder.
Sheridan, Emerge Supply Attendant.
Amira, I'm a ER nurse.
Miranda, I'm an emergency nurse as well. I'm Jill, I'm an emergency nurse as well.
I'm Sarah. I'm an AA and a food attendant.
Mike, I'm a feeder resident.
Wendy, CNL in the war.
My name is Edwin. I'm one of the respiratory therapists.
Dustin, I'm one of the ICU nurses.
I'm Amanda. I'm an OR nurse.
Grace, General Surgeon.
Rod,
Michael Barrister, anesthesiology.
Wade, paramedic.
Mark, paramedic.
Robin, I'm an OR nurse. OR nurse. OR nurse.
Nancy Loving.
With CT flash. Let's share your photos. If you don't want your photos, you can let me know.
Thank you. Fantastic. It is really outstanding to have this many people involved. This is our biggest camp. There's no doubt about it. So those of us who have brought this together have nothing financial to disclose. And I've already mentioned we are really streaming this on YouTube Live right now. So I'll show you a little later on how to log on to that. We've already shared some of that log on information, and those of you who are watching already, hi, welcome. Sorry that you missed the summer. This is supported by UBC CPD. Thank you, Dr. Hall, for arranging that. That's super meaningful to the physicians.
And just so that the family physicians in the group know, this is also something that you can claim for CME.
Thank you. Too many people to acknowledge, so I made the error, I think, of making a list. It's probably a bad choice. I should have just said a whole lot of people and moved on. I do want to acknowledge these people in particular. Also acknowledge the Nemesis paid for our supper. Thank you again. We do have also attending this evening remotely will be Dr. Barry, who is a hematologist, and so we can look forward to interacting with him via the telephone. So I just wanted to call that out. Cast of characters involved in this is many. It took a bit of work. So undoubtedly I've missed someone from this list. This is also a unique night in that this is the first time we've had a formal call to simulate, as it were. So the Combined Quality Oversight Council, which is second to the board in our organization, have been looking at the major hemorrhage protocols and looking at case reviews and have put the call out to simulate and to practice these. So I'm thrilled at that, as you might imagine, because I do simulation for a living. And so that makes it pretty exciting for me. And so they tasked the laboratory and trauma quality councils doing that work. And in turn, Eric came to us and said, could you help? And of course, we're also happy to help. So that's one of the ways in which we got here together. But I can't quote these people directly. I might be misquoting them. But it is possible that an individual who may look like that said that the mucky mucks have finally come to their senses and have asked us to simulate something. That is a possible quote. And another possible quote may come from someone who looks sort of like that. And she may have said, let's do something really easy and straightforward next time when we do a simulation. And I'm just going to call that they keep getting more and more complicated. She's not to be trusted on that front. So that's, I think, the real call to simulate. Friends, we're going to address sort of the psychological safety in the room. You know, a lot of you are pretty sim savvy already. Some of you facilitate, some of you have been doing it for years. Now, some of you, I know at least one person, it's their first time. So we can spend a lot of time setting up sort of the room, the so-called safe container. But I'm hoping you already get a sense in the room that it's safe here, that we're going to have fun here. It's not for marks. And so please, let's all of us, frame the event as a learning opportunity. We're really here to learn about the topic at hand. We're also here to learn tonight about how to simulate these sorts of topics. So part of what I'm going to just be explicit about is part of what's going on here we've never done before. And so we may drop the ball a few times tonight, and please just give us the grace to pick up the ball. And if we need your help, we might ask for it. We may have to do a timeout here and there. Who knows how it goes? But generally speaking, I'll just ask you to play real. And we'll be a little more specific in a few moments about what we are doing real and what isn't real. And so therefore, because it's a mannequin and not a human, I know that you're great at taking care of humans, but because it's a mannequin, please just acknowledge that it might not tell you what you think. And so there's a fallibility in that, especially for experts. The more expert you are, the harder it is to do simulation. Also, please, just this sort of genuine positive nature for each other and a positive regard for each other, and please ask questions on the go. If you can't hear something doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't look the way you think it should, just ask, and we'll try to, fill in the blanks. So that's my attempt at summarizing psychological safety. A simpler way to do it might have just been said, just be nice, be Canadian, say please, say thank you. We do invite the sort of suspension of disbelief. And so it'd be easy during many of the times tonight when it isn't going as well as you imagine to cross your arms and say, oh, this isn't real. And what I'm going to invite you to do is just go along for the ride, please. So to suspend disbelief, as it were. And if you do that, on the flip side, what we'll do, our part of that, we'll try to provide you with as realistic a learning opportunity as we can. And there's going to be a space in between. There's for sure limitations on both sides of this arrangement. But that's the deal we're going to try to strike. So, in other words, we're going to do some real things and we're going to do some not real things. So, I need to be a bit more articulate about that. So, here are things that we are really going to do. We're really going to communicate, and we're really going to do our patient assessments. And I'm going to invite you all, please, to communicate a little more loudly and a little more thinking out loud than you normally would. That'll help everyone around you get a sense of what's going on, because remember, they can't see it either, right? It's not you. So I'll have to leave, but please speak aloud. We're going to try to use the play domain tonight in the EHR. And so we've assigned the people I think who need to be assigned their play logins. For those of you who that's appropriate for, and I think we've got everybody. If not, then we'll work that out on the fly. I'll show you a quick screen grab of what that looks like. And so that means that some things are going to be in the computer, and including, for instance, things that you may order and our labs. This patient, not to spoil the case, but this patient will need a chest tube in its left side this evening. And we're going to ask you to really do that, as you'll see downstairs. But we have a task trainer for that. So instead of doing it with the mannequin, we're going to beside the mannequin, it's going to be another torso. And that's the torso you're going to poke with a sharp stick. Real-ish. Okay? Real-like. Please run the MHP, the major hemorrhage protocol, as you would, which would include the paperwork that you use. We're going to try to scan as we would. We're going to try to put orders in and look for data as we would. If we have to fill something in and do something on the fly, we will. But that's a big part of the intention this evening. So we're going to really do that. But for those of you who aren't familiar, this is sort of what it looks like to log into the play domain. Many of you are familiar with this. The key piece being that we've given you a password. A username, and the password is all Cerner lowercase. So that's the same for everybody. So what are we not really doing that we're really going to do? We're not really going to use patient monitors. So you'll see that there'll be a laptop, like there often is in simulation, at the head of the bed, and likewise on the anesthesia machine. We will not be placing any invasive monitors tonight, like our lights, for instance. And the patient later is going to develop a right chest wall injury, which we're not going to poke with a sharp stick. So there'll be no decompression of the right side. We are also not running the MHP in real time. We're going to run the MHP, but everything about it is going to be faster than you can anticipate in real life, including the turnaround time from the lab, and including the pace with which the hematopathologist might call to consult. And so just about a lot of the things are going to be faster than. Another thing that may catch you up and that we're not purposely doing is this so-called positive patient ID business. So I think you can anticipate that the only thing that will align, hopefully, in all of the documentation is going to be the patient's name. Everything else, like the MRN, everything else could be right, wrong. We're not trying to trick you on that front. This isn't, oh, the PID is wrong, it's the wrong patient. So that's not the story here. Just accept that a lot of that's going to be wrong, except for the patient name. So that'll cover the 5 rights this evening, or 7 rights, however many there are. Okay, so that's that.
Can I just clarify?
Please.
Although we're not actually physically placing invasive monitoring, if you want an invasive line,
Thank you.
please say out loud what you're doing and walk through it in a time that would be reasonable to place an line.
I think also important to identify who Tanner Rourke is. Does anyone know who Tanner Rourke is?
Drew would like us all to know who Tanner Rourke is.
I don't know who Bo is, sorry.
So we will be able to do bedside ultrasound in a manner of speaking. It's sort of a mock tool that we have, etc. So there's going to be we're going to take some liberties this evening, quite a few of them, and thank you for coming along on that ride. In terms of the format for the rest of the evening, I've already kind of described briefly how this evening is really about some of these goals and objectives that we have. And as I mentioned, I think that we're not going to really test the MHP tonight. That's not in real time. I really feel like what instead we're doing is preparing the stage for how to test the MHP. And we're still going to learn a lot this evening. So looking forward to that. So this is a pre-brief. Set the stage, share the rules. We're doing that as we speak. Shortly, we'll fire this simulation up, and half of you, or a good chunk of you, will come downstairs and we'll receive this patient from our ambulance colleagues and start caring for the patient in the trauma room. And that's the practice in the practice part. There'll be a couple of people observing as well. The camera will be following around, for instance. I'll be observing as well. then while that's happening, people will be able to observe the YouTube here in this room. Sooner or later, though, that patient will be stabilized and will need to go to the OR, at which time people will have to go to the OR and receive that patient, and the emergency team will come up here. When the care in the emergency department is over, Dr. Delaney is going to facilitate what we'll call a HUT debrief. So that's sort of in the moment, quickie, snappy, maybe not as fast and involved as some of the things you're used to in sim, or maybe closer to the kind of thing you might do in the clinical context, quick, snappy, just to get some of the content out. And similarly, after the care in the OR is completed, we'll do a HUT debrief there, quickie, snappy, a couple of things to talk about together, till we all come back together in this room, where the larger debrief will occur, and that's an awful lot of people. I'm looking forward to that. So that's what that debrief will look like. Shortly, I'll talk about it in a second. What I also just wanted to say is after all that, we'll compile what we can compile. We'll share it with anybody and anybody who wants to hear about it, particularly the 2 trauma councils that are supporting this work, emergency team, OR team, etc., the transfusion services, etc., just to share the learning, and if there are any follow-up items, we'll be sure to address those. So this, these debriefings, this big debriefing tonight's going to be a little different than some of the debriefing you're used to. It's really going to be focused on system issues. We're going to try to focus on system issues. So it's not about individual performance, not less about team and communication than we're used to often, which doesn't mean to say we can't talk about that stuff, because that's part of the story. But really, we're looking at the system issues. And so it's going to be a different kind of debrief. And it'll look like we'll go around the room, and I'll essentially ask everyone to share something that they think went well and something that they think could be improved on. Or something that went well, something could be improved on. And each person will chime in like that, and we'll just keep going. It's a little different. Normally, those conversations are separate. We'll be focusing all the while on safety issues and trying to identify those. System issues. We'll review looking for, again, system issues and review by trying to identify where are the opportunities for improvements in our care. When I say system issues, this is what I mean. Things like roles, things like say, the processes that we're employing, environmental things like where things are, or X pieces of equipment wasn't available, the tasks themselves, and of course, tools and technologies. So that's that. At any time, if, for instance, you are a member of the World Wide Web, you could log on to and watch this on your phone. And we'll be streaming it in this room. So the way you find it if you're looking is to Google YouTube Cecil Victoria, and if you're feeling lucky, you push that button and it'll come up. And it's a live feed, so it's there. Couple of things. We do encourage you to turn off your autoplay if you're watching, this streaming. And the reason for that is if we lose contact at any time, if we don't want to lose our buffering, as it were, you're going to have to re-establish that connection by sort of clicking on the icon that is Cecil, this thing, and it'll come up again. But the reason I think I mentioned to turn the autoplay off is if you don't turn it off, as soon as the video loses its connection, the next thing is going to come up, and before you know it, you'll be watching a commercial for who knows what. So that's my hope for that. So we are on time, and we've eaten. That makes me pretty happy. So this is a schedule we're going to shoot for. We're imagining about an hour plus minus in each of the 2 care arenas in eMERGE, in the OR, with the thought that we'd be back here around 8 o'clock to do the big debrief. A couple of things just to remind. We have put signage up downstairs at eMERGE so that the community at large is aware that the simulation is going on. We have checked with the charge nurses and the core, and both of those leadership teams are comfortable with us and fully aware that we're doing this. We've identified some pieces of equipment as not for human use to assure that nothing from the simulation world finds its way into the clinical world, so we're happy about that. The other thing I wanted to add before I ask if Dr. Hall, if you had anything to add, was a message from Dr. Barry on behalf of the MHP, he's a hematologist pathologist. His words that he wanted me to share was, if you're caring for a patient and you think even remotely that maybe you should call an MHP, their encouragement is to call it. That it's easier to stand down than to not have initiated it, or rather to have initiated it too late. So that's the message from Dr. Barry, and hopefully if he's watching, I got that right. So that's it. Dr. Hall, anything you want to add?
Just for those of us in the OR who aren't as familiar maybe with communication with hematopathology, how it works is once an MHP is called in a merge, Dr. Barry or whoever's on call will be notified. He will then be calling in to connect with whoever's in charge in emergency. Similarly, when the patient changes location, that person, typically in Victoria, is aware of where the patient is in the hospital based on the news he's getting from the lab. So he will actually know how to contact us in the operating room. And so we can either wait for a call from hematopathology, or if we have a specific question in the operating room, for example, that we wanted to run past a specialist, we can actually call down to the lab and they will contact him for us. And that's how it will work tonight. So we can either wait for the phone call, and there will be two contacts, one in emergency and one in the operating room. Or if you're wanting to know or wanting some guidance on specific blood products, you can actually pick up the phone, call the lab, they will contact Dr. Barry, and he will be available to you.
So just a question, so when you guys are doing an MHP, you're actually talking to people in Victoria at the same time, like they know what's going on in the Nanaimo
They
hospital?
have all of
That's
our lab
interesting.
results.
Okay.
They're helping us facilitate and anticipating what blood products we might need. So for example, where a protocol might suggest that we thaw 2 units of frozen plasma, when Dr. Barry knows the scenario after he's spoken to the emerge shop, he might say, you're going to need at least 4, so he will direct the lab to thaw 4 units. As you are probably aware, we typically only have 2 units of platelets at any given time. If he becomes aware that that might be an issue, they'll already start mobilizing resources from other communities.
Wow.
Any other questions? I think I should probably call out, I've asked Eric to do a task this evening, and thank you. Eric's going to hang out in here and kind of stick handle the room and help us if we have to reconnect, if we lose our buffering. So who knows? We tested it earlier, it worked out just fine, even in the elevator. So hopefully we won't lose it. We're basically going to start streaming shortly. Excellent. So I think we're doing well. Another moment for questions. If you'd be so kind to take your plates and such to the other room, that'd be awesome. Otherwise, have a really good time tonight, and we'll see you shortly.
Order my stuff. Yeah. Is it necessary for yeah, like when we get our call, we will they tell us, like I hold the blood bank, I'll hold that. Will they, you guys say to us, you know, run or is it just proper for us to straight run?
We're just going to come in front of you here. Thank you. Thank you.
Just run? Okay, yeah. So that was our.
But don't
yeah, one time I almost did it for like yeah. Exactly. Okay, that's right. That's one question.
Okay, down.
They went downstairs, they snuck out like 10 minutes ago.
I figured she.
Yeah.
Everything's good, Darren.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have to take an elevator. Second.
I think that's what it is.
You want to carry the elevator?
Just grab it and take her
Yeah,
downstairs.
I do. Yeah, awesome.
Alright.
Tonight. I think we're okay, buddy. Thank you. 21. You good?
So, and then when the patient is transferred, in your, if it's not something, you know, is a comfortable wording that.
Say that again. Say that again. They'll keep up here to be like that.
Potentially, my wife is strong as guys too, or do you kind of go down for this guy and dry and all that?
So you probably will have a
Like throw
conversation
in a-
with the herbs. They may not be, you may not be intubating. It's usually one of the herbs that
Well,
will
no, I
intubate, right?
know, but I'm
But you're
prepared too. We're
so-
a team, I like it.
So we do
When
put
we
side things
decide
down to
if
mannequins.
we think the patient needs to be intubated. Exactly. Yes, yes. That's what I
Mannequins
know.
can tolerate an 8.
Mannequin can take an 8. Okay, that was my question. And I'm assuming dry. Don't do them up.
We have special lube.
Oh, silicone lube?
Which may not be here, so I might have to go there.
Did we bring out the special booth? Darren, great.
Yeah.
We have our vests on.
Why not?
Now let's talk about our roles.
Okay.
Okay, so they're not coming through the door.
Okay, so team. So you guys, we're just gonna pre-arrival.
Excuse me, behind you.
Okay, folks.
Behind you.
Can I just get everyone's attention? We got a pre-arrival. There's going to be a trauma coming in 3 minutes. Paramedics gave us a brief report. They've got a hypotensive motorcycle crash. You hear, like I said, 3 minutes. And he lost control of his bike on the highway. He was found 50 feet from his motorcycle. Altered mental status, hemodynamic instability. He'll be here pretty soon. Thanks. I'll let you guys decide who does what.
Hubert, you're TTL. You do it, buddy. You're my man. There we go. What the heck? Yeah. Sky? Go. Sky? You the merch stuff. There we go. Surgeon. So, Drew. Drew, There's gonna be TTL. Guys, be or not? Am I just the old guy watching them, or?
We probably have 4.
Okay, so I will be your airway guy. So your prop, I'll be your airway guy. Well, let's say, like, yeah, like in real life, you would be, yeah, sometimes you're both here.
Yeah, I know, I'm just.
I know.
Okay, I'll be the yellow intensivist guy.
Okay, me and Mira are gonna be bedside.
Okay, who's that?
Miranda and Mira are
bedside?
Yeah.
So you guys are bedside?
Yeah, we are.
Just be careful.
Communication numbers, we have 4 nurses, 8 as well.
Sorry. It's not gonna work. If one of us is trying to chirp and you're on that field and you have to.
Drew, do we have an age?
I think he's like mid-30s.
Perfect.
Who's our fourth nurse?
I'm happy if they want to take over.
No one?
He's gonna come over.
Joe, Joanne.
Who's TTL?
I'm TTL.
Thank you.
You
Is there any indication you want us to get ready?
Yeah, stay.
Stay with our side.
That's all?
Fluids.
Okay, you're back to the leaders that weren't ready. I'm just getting all my ID stuff ready.
Okay.
My seven, here.
Yeah, preamble is cycle accident. I'm your airway guy. And I'll do that. Hi guys, I'll be I'm Dr. Paul again, so I'll let you start.
Okay, so this is Mike versus car, high-speed NBA. Approximately 35 years old. He's found about 50 feet away from the accident. He's been decreasing LOC. Without his knee brake, the pulses, blast pressure was 85 and 55. Heart rate of 1.8. Respiration to 30, sat to 91. We got on to 502. We've got about 10 milliliters of 1 milligram of TXA running.
Okay,
We've got 2 large bore IVs, multi-drop.
Okay, guys, so we'll do the transfer to the bed, and Sky, if you just want to start with doing ABC.
So, level of consciousness throughout the.
Decreasing. GCS 13.
And yeah, John, if you can just help with the Sky with the ABC, just tell me any ultrasound finder.
Just looking for a new one. All right. You're Tanner Ward. Yes.
You ready to snap on this? Yep, on the disc. On the right disc.
Hello.
Right there.
What's your name?
You got it. And then once.
And let's start the monitor. We need some vitals, guys. Hey guys, we'll just start the monitor here. We're just press or. Yeah, go ahead. It says the airway,
I think there's a new apparatus on the side here.
So I've got mumble
A lung plate here is identified on the left side.
opening up spontaneously. Can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?
What can we get inside our name?
So I've got no response.
Coming out right. Okay, 25 microgram ID of fentanyl. 25 fentanyl.
Take care. We have 2 18 gauges of ACS. Okay, you guys, here's his ID. Okay, and they're both flushing well. One on
You
each
can
side,
start
one
You can start a bolus of IV fluid. Yeah, very lactate 1 liter. Yes,
We're maintaining the patient's
It's just hanging behind here.
And you have on lung sliding down?
I don't see any lung sliding on the right side at all. There's a lung point here on the left. So that's right pneumothorax.
Okay, so we're breathing spontaneously. We have stopped yet?
on it, 91 at.
Just 50. So now which IV can I use?
Okay, so we do have a B issue identified by John. There's a pneumothorax on the left side, and with that blood pressure, John can start working on the chest tube on the left side for sure. Decompress that chest. Here we go. There's the
Joe, I started 1 liter of normal saline bolus.
significant free fluid.
Okay. 50 of fentanyl.
In the right upper quadrant to that height. So can I get a phone just to call general surgery? Can we call general surgery, please? Here we got positive fast in the abdomen and free fluid in the left upper quadrant.
We're gonna take off the helmet while I, is next. Everybody's gonna go ahead and take the helmet off.
You're saying everything? Standard manager on what you know as well. At this point, we will call the massive transfusion protocol with that blood pressure, the blood in the abdomen. Okay, so,
Jen, search to your phone.
okay, excellent. We're,
They're not yet. They're called.
What are you calling your phone?
so, I think we need to call the hematologist, Dr. Barry, for the transfusion,
He's calling for
yeah, yeah. We'll call the massive transfusion protocol.
Just suctioning up, it's just airways open, it's been sucked, there's no foreign body.
Can I ask for pelvis?
On non-breathing, flush.
Any pelvis instability? No?
I'm responding to a painful stimulus malformation.
Yes.
You, how many units?
Sorry.
Yes.
4 units. Any medication that we know this patient takes? Do we have any family around, or we can ask the patient, is he on blood thinner, or? We can talk to him, ask him if he's on any medication or is it too often.
First name again?
Tanner.
Tanner.
I have surgery on the shoulder.
Did you get your medication?
Okay, guys, I'm just gonna call the pause. So we do have hemorrhagic shock here. So this guy needs blood. There's a left-sided pneumothorax you're not gonna work on the chest tube. For now, I'm gonna say airway is not the priority. Basically, is to stabilize those hemodynamics. So chest decompression and start blood on it. We did get 1 gram of PXA on site, so we can start another gram that can go over 8 hours. Yeah, and surgery is solved. Yeah,
Is Justin from ICU?
I'm happy with that, yeah.
Just prepping for a chest tube on the left side.
I'm Indy out there.
Thank you, Derek, Justin and Kathy, got my CEO. So we have
one shot, no IV. There's a pneumothorax. Potentially a head injury.
okay. And do we have a central line or central access?
We don't have central line. That would be very useful for the massive transfusion protocol. And then arc line just to monitor hemodynamics.
Okay.
Yeah. The first thing is to decompress the chest.
Okay. Well, is there anybody that can put in an IO or tomorrow?
Oh, that would be very helpful. We've got two good base on both sides.
Okay. We're just gonna, just for the central access.
Let's just clarify.
Cool, wanna do that?
Yeah, if you know, if you have a fracture here, like after the chest decompression.
Okay.
Do a central line, yeah.
Sure.
Thanks, Fred. So, multi-trauma, hemorrhagic shock, and then lateral pneumothorax. John is putting a chest tube, massive transfusion protocol call. He got the KXA 1 gram. We have a positive fast. He's bleeding in his belly, so he likely will need a lot of products. But yeah, I think he needs to go to the OR.
And what do we think his injuries are here?
Injuries is left-sided pneumothorax. Right side is normal. Okay. So left-sided pneumothorax and abdominal lead.
No pelvis, bone extremity.
Pelvis are stable, friendly. We can ask for portable pelvis while we're doing all this thing and a portable chest as well.
Just want to confirm that.
Any long bone fractures on the femur?
Nothing obvious.
Nothing obvious.
Right ankle. You got right ankle torn, no long bones.
Right ankle deformed to the IO on the left side. As soon as we're done, we can cover with one blanket, and maybe even a bear hugger. What's the temperature on this guy? At some point, we will need to log all that.
You're both running.
Fluid. I've got the TXA on this
Hey,
side.
Jody, what's your temperature? Temperature is normal.
No, he's 35.2. 35.2. You put some more blankets on it, but I give them.
Joe, temperature 35.
Edwin.
I couldn't even lie. I can't
I've got a blood gas for you. So, 17.
So basically, he's asymptomatic, hemorrhagic shock.
X-ray just as soon as this.
Sure. Is Dr. Barry aware of the, you've been paged? He's been paged.
John, new vitals, 79 on 51. 126.
We can start transfusing negative.
Sorry, 91.
91%.
You need to use that.
Respirations.
Any people for love roll. This side is.
Thank you. Okay. We'll be on my count. We're ready. 3, 2, 1, and roll.
Okay, any obvious spine deformity or exosis in the back? Any saddle anesthesia or anything, rectal tone?
No.
All right, okay. That's good, thank you. You can-
3, 2, 1, back.
Not right now, okay, he's still stable, so unfortunately, we'll hold on and vent now. Again, I wouldn't want to intubate him right now, so.
Could I get a taller? Could I get a taller?
Sequel for,
I don't mind. I got it.
Or ready? Okay. Do we have any blood products that are here?
So the rapid is ready to
Not
go.
here yet.
Oh, negative, on its way? Okay. And where are we at with fluids?
We're on your first. Hey, you're never gonna do second on
I would like the second liter, but then we stop. Okay, just after that, I think it's right. Okay, guys, as the leader, I'm just gonna pause right here, okay? So we have hemorrhagic shock, motorcycle accident, left chest was decompressed with the chest tube. There's a positive pass, so he's bleeding in his belly. We're waiting for blood product. He got TXA. We're warming him because he's hypothermic. Any ideas here? We didn't intubate him yet because he's too unstable right now, and it's not a priority. Any ideas?
Should we be holding off on crystalloid and only be giving them blood products?
We gave 1 liter. I think we could stop there. It's just that right now, I hate to see that systolic and the blood's not here yet, but we could hold on.
What do you think, General? Would you want us to hold off on further crystalloid and wait for?
Yeah, you had 1 liter. Do you want a second liter?
How far out? Blood should be here within 2 minutes, I would assume, if it's okay.
Okay, so no second leader, as a team we decided no second leader. I think that's a good idea, but blood has to be here. And we need,
Come on in, that's right, he's at the exit, it's left. Yes.
yeah, just do the extra Elvis.
Any O blood, O negative down?
Yeah, I asked for O negative. I asked for 4 bags.
Okay.
So, blood is taking a little bit longer, the wrong paperwork is given, they're aware about it now, so now they're having to get it.
Okay, and I'm fine with O negative. I just want to start, with transfusing right now. Okay. Okay, Pete. Yes.
He's a big guy.
Hey, Mark.
He said 3, you want both?
As my airway guy, how comfortable are you to protect his airway right now?
He's only, he's protecting his airway at this point. So I'm concerned about hemodynamic instability. If I activate him right now, his airway's clear, he's maintaining pulse control right now.
Can we get a packet?
Oh, thank you. Actually, with,
we're trying to do
So Drew, I'm just doing another secondary survey. Especially the Jimmy, we'll get here, we'll get to your X-ray, you can hear it there, the one thing, so they're actually doing on both sides now.
with his blood in his tube. The second one, you want to clamp that?
How much do we have here?
You have 800.
800? I'll go to 1.5.
Okay.
Well, thank you, sir.
Motorcycle, high speed, car. Is GCS still 13?
It's now 8? GCF is now 8.
It's now 8.
Sorry, that was.
Sorry.
Let's get ready.
Sorry, what are we doing GCF?
I need some ketamine, 100 milligrams.
Hold on. Sorry. Tanner, can you hear me? So can I ask what his GCS is?
He's not responding.
GCS is now 3.
Okay.
Ketamine, 100 IV.
And my heart. Okay. Sky, why don't we try a 2-person? Well, you want to use the bronchi, you want to yeah, because we're gonna leave the collar in place.
Sorry, the bronch? What? Sure.
So we're gonna use the blood,
Okay.
and you're gonna use the bronch.
Okay.
So try it.
What, we getting 100 because.
More such a rock.
I want water.
How much?
100 IV or rock.
What are you gonna want afterwards? 100?
I like propofol drip, but yeah.
Propofol? With pressure?
Yeah. Yeah. The pressure is, again, we'll see, but it's just propofol drip lightly, and when you start giving it, tell me, and we'll see the blood pressure.
All right.
So Sky, what you be on that side, if we're gonna do the parking?
Sorry, what happened?
I'm looking at the blood, like tomorrow.
Let's go.
Yeah, over the rock there, kind of the airway, and then we'll work on that.
You're gonna stabilize that? We have nasal swabs. We have a staff.
That's good. That's
Let's try to pre-offset it. So you got it here?
I don't know if you already saw the test. No.
Yeah, so we're gonna get high flow going there. Let's take this off, and let's start a pre-oxygenating a little bit.
Is it better off? Right this way, they sent the wrong paperwork and it's putting it back.
Question, can we use the blood on the?
Where's my photographer? This is like my part right now. Come on.
All right, we have NBC, high speed motorcycle, left sided pneumothorax, abdominal bleed, massive pressure for all during this paperwork, so we're waiting for blood product. They're working on intubation right now, because they have GCS of 3. We're going with IV as well as rocket. Just X-ray shows compression.
As we prepare the interview, is the anesthesia in the room?
I'm available. I've got,
Do we have a two cell application? It's 91, okay.
We're gonna do a two-person technique. Because you thought I was possible. So I was going to. This guy was going to.
So hang a second later, okay?
Hey guys, can I just say one thing? Do you suspect this to be a difficult area?
We do.
Then I would ask that we give the most experienced practitioner in the room to represent it.
All right.
Yeah.
What makes you guys suspect it?
So he's on the knee.
It's coming right back.
I don't want
Joanne? New blood pressure, 75 over 45.
We're hanging a second leader high. So I mean, we don't have any blood, so we need 91 second leader being hanged. I don't know if you have blood.
No, we need to have it through a.
We'll give another. Briefly, and take a quick look. So I mean, I'm not seeing any common airway. I'm going very briefly, just to keep letting me. And we're going to take a look. I'm not seeing any disruption of the trachea. That's something I'd be worried about. Okay, let's come back. I'd actually like to try with the skylight and quickly, just because I know directing with the two-person technique can be a bit confusing. Can I get a skylight, please? Thank you.
No
sedation medications. You guys want to go with ketamine?
Actually, drop it already.
Just with that psychologist 75.
I think that's fine. Let's go with 50 of ketamine and 100 of rock, please.
Now just touch it.
But after that view, it looks like it's pretty good to get through and down. So, sir, my name is Dr. Harrison. I'm here to help you. We're going to keep you safe. Doing just fine.
Yeah. No, just pretend.
And then, where's that? Gorgeous.
And 100 of rocket.
Gorgeous. So keep bagging for a little bit, and we'll set that rock again. So we have first view is good view.
Hey, Johnny, pedal pulses on the side of the fracture, like neurovascular intact, or?
Ready,
Yeah, ready?
ready, comparable to the other side.
But no like open fracture or bleed? Is there no fracture?
That way we will mobilize
And
So, in about 30 more seconds, I mean, we're oxygenating well. We recycle that blood pressure. Is anyone doing an arterial line?
I asked for an arterial line.
If we could get an arterial line, that would be beautiful. While we're waiting for blood products to show up.
After for the heart line, can we get a femoral line?
Certainly, please go ahead. Okay.
New blood pressure, 76 on 49. 122 for heart rate.
John,
Does anyone, what pressors do we have available, guys? Sorry.
We can get
My medication. So if we could get a norepi infusion started and ready to go once that thermal line's in, we'd appreciate it. We've got 2 large bore IVs. Sorry, guys, trying to close the loop here. 2 large bore IVs?
Yes, we do.
Very good. Do we have fluid running wide open right now?
Yeah, but we decided as a team that we would go more than 2 liters of distillate.
Okay. Why?
Oh, yeah, no.
Very good. I'm ready to go. So, all right, I'll come on in, we'll get this out of our way. So, being very careful with the jaw, coming around the corner, getting myself situated, off to the side, thank you. And again, delicately making our way in. And then we're just gonna sit and see. And then up and in we go, style it out, please. It's beautiful, good visualization going in, excellent neck stabilization. And away we go. A little bit hung up, but that's okay. Yeah. Time for corkscrew. There we go. And forced. Love it. And inflate. And we're gonna reattach. Do we have a CO2 detector, please?
But you're wanting just central
Yeah, I'm gonna do central line.
So I'm seeing good misting on this tube. I'm holding it at roughly 24. We can slide out just a little. Good. Excellent. Good curve.
Hey, John, we're not actually putting central line, so is central line in?
Yeah, we just got to doing that right now, the process.
So once we have the central line, I think it's starting some norepinephrine. My goal is going to keep a mean of 60. Everyone in agreement? I don't want to over.
First of all, you have to have blood count here yet?
I think we're checked in recently with blood there.
So, who should we call to get that blood here?
They were gonna stop with the.
So he got one grad. So Oneg is here? I asked for Oneg multiple times.
Okay.
And so my question is, can we use that blood from the hemothorax?
You can still listen to this.
Later there. I don't know. Do we have the capacity to do that?
Always big stuff. I don't believe that we do. I see you. Do we have the ability to use the blood from his chest?
Not here.
Okay.
I don't have that.
And we have a central line.
We have Can I ask you, we just do a recap and plan like this position?
Okay, guys. I'm just gonna pause. Okay, so we have an MVC, high velocity, multi-trauma, right side of pneumothorax, potential head injury and C-spine injury, as well as a significant bleed in the abdomen. This guy is in hemorrhagic shock. We did give 2 liters of crystalloids. We decided to stop as a team. We need blood products. He got TXA 1 gram. So at this point, you know,
We actually started giving a bit of crystalloid. We waited sort of more than 5 minutes.
We have, so we can increase.
and airway has been secure.
Airway secure.
He's venting nicely.
Oh, and I can clap.
Others, yeah.
Beautiful. Start the blood.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1.
So how many units do we have for high pressure?
How many units do we
We
have?
have 2 here.
2 units.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe we can text another
Well,
We've got Tanner Road,
I would actually not say based on that pressure right now. He's had a little bit of ketamine and my apologies for now. Doing well.
And then I give you a sticker.
So,
Here's a sticker, just wait till you saw the red. Oh, you got the, okay.
just like the blood pressure again.
Let's just do that again.
So are you comfortable to go to OR with blood running? Yeah.
I like it. So arterial line, you can bring that up.
Got 1 negative, give me 1 negative.
Can we actually have a waveform of an
Yeah,
I'm not gonna give this.
Thank you.
Of an art line, yeah, if you go through the motions of putting it in, we can
No,
generate.
we did.
Just as a heads up, we're gonna be putting blood under pressure here.
Yeah.
Thank
Everybody
you.
should be wearing PPE.
Are you talking?
Yeah.
You're not getting it.
Here's your preliminary, so here's your first labs. There's one.
Okay, guys, I'm just gonna read out loud some numbers here. He has a hemoglobin of 59. His calcium is 2.0, potassium 3.0. He's acidotic with a pH of 7.2 and bicarbonate of 18, lactate of 4. compared to lactate of 5, 30 minutes earlier. INR 1.4, and yeah, fibrinogen 1.5.
Okay, let's make a file.
So with his high INR, are they thawing fresh frozen?
Sorry?
With his elevated INR, are they thawing fresh frozen? Are they thawing it?
It's usually 30 minutes in thaw
Yeah,
in real world.
yeah.
They almost start thawing.
Not yet.
250 units, that's great, thank you.
And then,
And I'll do a 1-to-1, his platelet count is 118, so we need one, actually, I would order that 2 bags of platelet.
So in terms of our transfusion targets.
Yeah.
Let's, these massive trauma, let's say 1-to-1,
Yeah.
packed red to FFP, so that we stay ahead instead of fall behind. Things we need to be aware of are pushing on tractor calcium and magnesium. We don't actually be in trouble. The other thing I would say is once all these lines are in, we need to get warmers on this gentleman and get him upstairs.
Yeah, I agree with
He's
that.
gonna get cold and then we're in trouble.
I can see it's 10:30, 34:09. I'm gonna get it.
Unable to get an art line. Once we've done an art line on, art line access, normal line access, let's try an art line. We can start doing that.
What's our definitive, like, where are we planning to take this patient? Are they?
Or.
So, okay, so when is that happening after?
Or is ready. I would go to OR now with the blood running. Yeah.
Miranda, let's just do warm blanket. And then we'll only OR until we have that ready. Yeah.
Okay, we have a central line on the right side, we have blood. The guy's hypothermic, we need to control the hemorrhage, he needs to go to OR. Okay, so everybody agrees with that? He's being transitioned to the ventilator, and then once he's on the ventilator, we'll rush him to OR.
Do you want a catheter before he goes up to the OR?
You can have the catheter in OR and start line in OR. He needs hemorrhage control. Okay, he's actively bleeding his upper leg and his chest. Okay?
Let's get the propofol from the hospital with IV on the right-hand side. So if you could hook up the propofol, you want it to start really light.
No propofol.
No propofol. You don't want any sedation.
No sedation. You don't have any rest table and.
So the NRGH has just been started.
0.05. Unfortunately, that's who decided that. Yeah. So the OR is ready. Okay. OR is ready, guys. We're moving to OR. As a group.
Yeah. So it'll shut off.
Yeah.
So if we unplug, it'll shut off. So let's just finish this unit.
I think that's a great
Everybody
idea.
get their ducks in a row, and then we'll
So
go.
that unit is almost done.
This one's done. We're waiting on
Okay, excellent. Cool. So then finish the second unit. Just stop there at the unit and go to OR. Okay.
Who's on the line with blood bank right now?
I got it.
I'm trying to locate Dr. Berry's.
Very good. I would like me to be greeted by 4 units of packed red cells and 4 units of FFP in the operating room, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get there.
Do you have a phone number?
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, sure. I gotta help you up the stairs. Just if I'm not paying attention, just yell at me.
There he is.
Okay.
Give it. Blood.
What pressers do
Thank
we
you.
have available
Thank you.
at this moment? Let's run our room to 5.
Yeah, we'll increase that.
So that's now up to 0.1, Mike's per kilogram per minute.
So Noreth got increased.
Stop. So, Dr. Jacobson.
Just a normal blood. Yeah.
For my transition upstairs, could I have some vasopressin in a 50 cc bag?
Guys, explosive communication.
So for medications, who's in charge of collecting?
Yep, that's me.
Thank you. Could I have some rocuronium and some vasopressin?
Yep.
Let's do a 20 cc syringe and some extra fluid to dilute, please. as well as some flushes.
So we need to blood Omar.
Blood bank.
Okay.
Before we go to the OR, Dr. Parrish just wants to do a quick.
Yes, we just don't need it for 8 days. We gotta give it.
So very important, just to summarize, the gentleman, he was involved in a motorcycle accident. We're very concerned about intra-abdominal bleeding. He has a chest tube that's already in place. We have had difficulty placing an arterial line down here. We made a decision that we will place it upstairs. We're running a massive transfusion protocol. We're very conscientious that this gentleman is starting to get cold. We'll have to warm him upstairs. We're going to be greeted by blood products upstairs. His C-spine remains on the X-ray. We don't know, so we're going to leave the collar on. He's already on norepinephrine. He's been fully paralyzed. We're not going to give him sedation now because we agreed that he's hemodynamically unstable enough that that's how we're going to proceed. Is there anything I have missed or any other concerns that we need to go through?
Well, I think we should.
Brilliant.
Who's that MRN, like nurse, prayer, one of the nurse nurses coming with us?
I'll go with this.
Okay.
So he's had a total of 2 units of blood. Dr. Berry is on the phone with Sky, so
Okay.
let's go to OR.
Just make sure. All right. Unlock. So what's going to happen is with the massive transfuser, you're going to be ahead of the bed. We will be behind the bed. Very good.
Before we just go, I got monitors over here. We take some light time.
Take the laptop.
And we'll just have it.
Yes.
So I got this cold.
You want to leave it here? Hey, can we just pause for a second? Can we just serve the next speaker?
Everything is on the laptop.
Thank you.
Very good. Hold on, we gotta test this.
Reconnecting. Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
Okay, let's go. It's just, is this just to carry up the stairs? Let's get on ready.
If we go to the elevator, we could,
There's a wheelchair.
We're gonna go to the elevator between here and CT.
The housekeeping card as well, we need to remove.
For the what?
We need another driver.
Okay, yeah, I can help. Okay, we're gonna go to the elevator just before Amanda.
You guys see, I can't really see that computer screen right now. You got it?
87 over 49.
So I'll give it the next one, eh? Like you go back to the floor.
Yeah.
Say slow down, slow down. Whoa.
Okay. Running speed. We got time. Okay. Slow down.
Everyone's in, everyone feels reasonable?
Yes, sir.
And a badge to go to 2, please.
Done.
You guys just cut? No.
So in order to get to OR9, it's actually going to be simpler to go right.
Okay.
There's fewer turns.
Go to the right.
Go to your right. And then slowly coming through. Map is 64. Beautiful.
Okay.
Route 9.
go down to the end, take a left, another left, and they'll be on the left. Stop for a second while the doors open. Okay. Brilliant. We need hats before we go in. No? That's important. All right, so moving up alongside. We'll get this door down. So again, let's make sure we don't lose anything in the transfer, always very important. So guys, this gentleman was involved in a motor vehicle accident recently. He's got a lot of intra-abdominal bleeding. He's got 2 units of packed red cells. Hopefully the blood products that I ordered from downstairs, which include 4 of FFP and 4 packed red cells, have arrived already. We need to make sure that he's warm. He's gonna get cold and he's already getting cold. When we go to transfer over, we're gonna try, we don't really have time to get our blood right now, Fred, we can certainly get it later. In terms of your suspicions of what's going on intra-abdominally, what do you think?
So what I consider, they will take over the door.
Is there any thought to cross-stepping the aorta at this point or no?
So just, so we catch him and it's slow,
Okay, so I know that's not something we normally have. Do we have a superceliac type available to us already, just in case we need it? It's coming over here. So Sarah, let's put him at a.
You guys have the bear hunter ready as well?
Yeah. He's getting cold, dude. He's definitely getting cold. So we'll need an upper and a lower warmer, please. Maria, can you give me the upper and warmer, the upper and lower, please? Or Sarah's got it. So that is now locked. So again, he has an unstable C-spine, so we'd like to maintain that throughout the transfer. He has that femoral line that you see and lots of IV access. I guess ICU team is going to be doing the transfusion. You guys are going to be closer to the bottom of the transfusion from down there because that's where a femoral line is.
Okay.
Okay, so on this side, I've got 2. So right here. Yeah. I've got 2 from there.
Okay.
How's everybody feeling? Very good. So I'm going to roll towards Edwin and then slide the board under. 1, 2, 3. We're going to come back down. Yep, come back down on the board. And on the count of 3, we're going to transfer across. 1, 2, 3. Across we come. Everything's free. Everyone's happy. Good.
Hold on, we got the cork.
Okay, so bed not away yet. Beautiful. Sarah, are we ready to transfer over our ventilator? Brilliant.
That was his fault.
Yep.
This is.
Okay, transferring over from the transport ventilator to my ventilator. So a little bit of gas that comes out of the top.
Are we okay to start?
Please transfuse. So I'd like a total of 4 of FFP, 4 packed red and 4 of FFP, and then we're going to repeat his level.
Just to recap, you said 2 units. We're going to give him another 2 that we already
We already have, and as soon as you have FFP, I'd like that in place. I'd like to transfuse in a 1-to-1 ratio.
Can I ask, who's our nurses? So I need one of you guys with a table beside us, and me and you are going to check the blood. One of you guys, and we'll hand it to Kathy. Kathy, all you do is just.
Leg, right?
Okay, far away, go for it. Yep, all yours. We just need a table, we just need a table.
Here.
that I stole from America. Did anybody get the chart from Emerge?
Pardon, sir? Dustin?
Nobody got a chart from Emerge?
I didn't get a chart, no.
Is there a runner here? Yeah, I can run.
Right.
Can you just grab the chart from Emerge? Thanks, Edwin. So. This is a conflict. I got Tanner, York, ROA, RT, Brown, PC, 4978. It is expired on 11th November. And C 055619566030. Here's your finger. That's what we see. You should have the one.
Please go, Scott. So the sooner we get a pass and figure out what we're doing, the better.
Let's do another one. Yeah, hook up the beer hook and I'll check this.
So far, so good. Got a line down there and then 2 on the other side. Actually, what I would like you to do is transfer our transfusion from that temple line over to this big line.
It's already done.
Beautiful.
And now you're already.
So warmers are on. We got that going.
We've got it right over down here. You've got another 18 over there.
So far. So the other thing we need to keep track of is grams of calcium, grams of magnesium. I haven't seen any calcium.
Warmers on, technically you're gonna have a different. Okay, we'll do that. I don't have.
We've got Tanner,
Cycling that back down. That's great.
Monet.
Right.
Don't actually prep. Right, don't actually prep.
Great though.
Yeah, probably staying.
I'm gonna bring this urine bag up towards me so I can see more.
Yeah.
I know this seems like a small thing, but I really like to have a folio.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't have a folio yet. If you could do that quickly and then proceed.
Okay.
Okay, so there's one that
Okay.
brilliant. So if I can have that bag there, and away we go. Blood pressure right now is actually at 68. Oxygen saturation is now
I'm just gonna move this.
96.
Thanks.
Alright, so we're gonna anticipate.
So I have some vasopressin and epinephrine ready in case I need to bolus when you guys go to open.
So he's gonna do a femoral drop.
Can we call material porter for a triple top 3 for anybody, for
So I actually have a quick question. Do we have anybody who's right now on the phone with the lab and blood bank? Okay, so Marie, I'm assigning you to be on the phone with the lab and blood bank. I want to know what the estimated time of arrival for my FFP and packed red cells are. And if you can continue to monitor the computer and let me know when those lab draws come up, I would appreciate it. Thank you, Marie.
Give a 20 cc syringe.
Okay. So, I'm just going to do a question. Is good. So, ICU team blood is here. Kathy, there's blood on your desk. Very good. Yes, they do mass transfusion protocols.
Yeah, you just have to be an I need 10 minutes. Okay. We won't get them down.
who's, just to be clear, just in case, Larry gets sued, can we ask who is our team lead right now?
I'll be the team lead for now. I'm about to transfer to Fred to open the abdomen.
Okay. And does anybody want to call ICU prior to getting started or anything? Not yet.
I think it would be reasonable to notify ICU as soon as Dr. Casper is finished getting an outline. Okay. He'll be chatting with the ICU.
All right, I'll call and let them know.
Thank you, sir. Please go ahead. Cycling on.
Robin.
Very good. So as you're entering the abdomen, I'm starting my blood pressure cuff.
Abdomen open.
Abdomen open.
What you found in the abdomen
Okay.
include a grade 4 splenic laceration, a deep liver laceration to the right lobe of the liver, and a small bowel perforation. That's it.
And then we'll take a minute to sort of catch up and then see where our levels are at. So Kathy, let me know once a total of 4 FFPers and a 4 if you have not packed in.
I'll take a quick bucket too.
Give me a second. I want to see some FFP go in before you start taking that. He's pretty.
Where's our count?
He's already here.
We just pretended.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Let's use this.
Temperature wise, warms are on, it's not bad.
There's 2 more units of red cells.
Okay.
2 more units right so? Okay.
So Kathy, remind me once the 4 units
So
of
where's
red cells are in that I need to get some calcium.
So I do need a dedicated OR nurse with me here to help check and write all this stuff down. Because I'm going to get involved. So you have to write down all the blood products we're getting. So as we check them, I just need one of you to write down the time and do all the things for us.
She's on the floor, so why don't I do that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, we're doing.
So
One of us is doing the paperwork.
the next thing that I'm hanging is a gram of calcium chloride.
Sure.
1 gram of calcium chloride going in.
Sorry, Sarah. What is the number, garage mode?
Another injury is a right lobe. Yeah.
Very good.
Let's
So once the happens.
Is there a 4th one?
Did they do it?
Yeah. Yeah. Just holler at me when it's complete, okay?
Okay. So all of that FFP can go in. Gorgeous.
So we'll leave that alone. Do we have the biggest?
Awesome.
You want
Let's
to,
check this.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Okay. 4th unit of blood liver on the
Right, 1 gram of calcium chloride is going in, and so far reasonably stable. I'm looking at my urine bag. Is the urine still like clear, or am I worried? It's bloody. Okay, so now I'm starting to get worried about.
Do we have more? I don't want.
Okay, but it's not warm yet. So.
Michael, this is for the very first one to take effect.
Yeah. So I think for now that transfusion reaction sits out here is effectively due to trauma from the motorcycle accident. So we'll put the pile on the uric and just like. Okay. That's fine. So that we'll keep that on the back burner. In terms of the pressure, it's starting to go back down a little bit. I'm going to increase. I'm going to add vasopressin 2.4 units per hour to the pressure support. And if you guys want to go ahead and stop the bleeding, because I'm falling behind. And all of that FFP, if it can continue in that great.
Whatever it is.
We are continuing the non-updated for 1 and adding the 2.4 units an hour of vaso.
Put it down here.
With a bolus of 1 unit of vaso.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep banging them in. We're just gonna swallow them back. Thank you.
Very good. Catch up as well.
Well, yes, he would have. And then just,
I see you.
Oh my God.
So we've got Tanner Road, MRS, sorry, this is, you're checking out. And he's getting 0510127485851. As far as the no health sector, he's leaving. And they're very well.
So do we see it roughly the same
So beyond left chest, spleens out, liver lack, pack. Yeah, let's do all the. You're happy to get
Canada Road, we're giving them, unit C051019633906 on FFC. What?
All of the stories are both of them, calcium and magnesium. So my temperature unfortunately is not 0.9.
You're not going to take that.
But it was like maybe 5 months ago.
I'm sort of saying,
So blood bank, they would like to have a repeat instead of blood work. So if we could get the lab back to do those draws for us while we're doing this, at least the CBC, I'd appreciate it. If you could do that, Amanda, I'd appreciate it.
I will call the lab.
Thank you.
When do you transfer this patient?
AD.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we still need time to stabilize. Right now he's on norepinephrine 0.1, vaso 2.4 units. I've got a meeting about 65, which is pretty reasonable. He's had 4 FFP, we're making 4 crush growth. And he's also got a calcium replaced. I'm going to replace his magnesium, which I should do. So I think it's just going to be
The lab has already been running draws.
if we could also.
The lab has already been running draws. We'll be calling the results yet.
Amanda, could you call back blood bank and have them send another 4 after 4 of FFP? Temperature's 30.9, and we're actively trying to. Let's go. Still cold. Still cold. You're still cold.
So that, is that up to date for those lab values up to date? Sorry. Lab, are those lab values up to date?
Those ones, no.
That's the first set. The second
So we're still waiting on our second set. We're hyperventilating
The
it.
second set is not available yet.
It looks like the beating under control.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any cervical leak?
At the moment, it looks like, number 10.
I mean,
Small injuries,
So we're assuming all the leak is fine.
Okay. So we'll keep the transfusion protocol going for a second while we catch up. Hopefully we can come down on these vasopressors. If we can, I would like that better. Urine looks reasonable.
I don't actually care. I don't care about whatever.
So we have this set up, and then we'll repeat that work and we'll see what we get.
So what are we using as a
okay, we can check it. We'll get
My
it.
threshold is beautiful, like least of all. But now I also like warm and
no, but like 1 years in the tree, right?
because you've got a belly and so on. So I would want that closed here in the back.
So, right into your hash rate. Loosen up. Let's get it going.
Yeah, just wondering why. Yeah.
We call Ryan.
Can we go to the unit? Can we go to the unit? Are we allowed to go to the unit now? There's a bed ready. I'd like to move it ASAP. I'm Mike. My name's Brian.
Hi, Ryan.
I'm fine, with the applicant.
So from what I understand from the surgeons, that there's no more surgical bleeding, any kind of ooze that's ongoing is quite opaque based on pH, based on his temperature, and based on the fact that he feel it behind him in terms of blood product. But with an open belly still here, we can't warm him. I can warm him better in the unit.
Yeah, two of them are fine. Because that just.
Let's go size.
Okay.
So we do have a second, lab working there.
So we're gonna switch to some guys. I want you to know he's now tachycardic. His oxygen saturation is fallen. He is getting a little bit. Medium blood pressure, please. So we're gonna turn the FiO2 up to 1. We're also gonna make his peak 12. And we see if that rises. Can we check the chest tube under the drape, please, to make sure that there's no problem there? The other thing I'd like to do, can we have a sterile ultrasound and see if we can get a view of sort of the lungs to see if we can see something on the alternate side? Brian, would you be able to do that for me?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Lovely.
So my peak pressures are way up. I'm gonna take the stethoscope. Well, excellent. So I want to listen to that right chest. I want to make sure that nothing was missed on that right side. If we can have chest tube equipment available in the room, I would appreciate it.
I will get the chest tube equipment in the room.
But I think that's what's going on. I'm also going to turn down my peak to about 5 to try and reduce what I think might be a problem. Dr. Casper, what do you hear? Okay, so Fred, I need you to place the chest tube on the right side, please.
I have the chest tube equipment.
So any other issues? I mean, I thought about transfusion issue before. I don't think that's him. I think this is a chest tube problem based on Dr. Casper's seat. Now that we have the ultrasound, I'm using point of care ultrasound to take a look at the anterior chest. So that's the pneumothorax. Please place the chest tube.
And that's like your hand action right up.
Okay. And then just monitoring to see if this fixes our problem. So his blood pressure is lowered again. His oxygen saturation is different.
How are you? I'm using blood product.
Beautiful.
Excellent. I'll take that shot.
Okay. I'm going to bolus with 1 unit of vasopressin, and hopefully that'll help with his pressure. Thank you, sir. That should improve soon. So oxygen saturation is improving. I don't really like that heart rate. I want it to be lower. Have we had all of the NRGH testing? And then Amanda or Dustin, do you have any updates in the blood bank about when our next bit of blood is coming?
We've got, it looks like 3 units on wait here.
And then, Amanda, is there any update on our lab work from the last draw?
They just showed it, but you missed it.
Sorry. Okay. So potassium's going a little bit low. Calcium's not awful. Magnesium's a little low. I'm going to add 2 grams of magnesium based on those values. We're also going to ventilate a bit more aggressively. So we'll increase our tidal volumes to 600. We're already at a rate of 20. And I'm going to increase my peak back to 10. And then INR is now becoming a problem if you want to talk to college. and see what I want to do in terms of FFP versus different factors.
Like we did on the change, we've given TXA and HERD.
Yep.
I don't know if you started TXA.
The TXA infusion has continued from downstairs.
Okay, love it.
He hasn't had platelets
Do you
yet.
want us to give him any
It's a 30. We should probably phone blood bank to get platelets done. Once Amanda's off the phone, if we could ask her to do that, that would be great.
you want us to give him any potassium?
Not right now. His potassium is going to go up as a result of all the other product we're giving. Forward.
How many units?
Usually, are you guys seeing a lot of ooze or no?
How many units of platelets do you want?
One adult platelet pool, please.
It's just a slow thing with the trying
I'm almost tempted to give him more calcium just to like activate those platelets as they go in. So I will be administering another gram of calcium chloride slowly through the peripheral IV.
So maybe there's too much pressure on the backs of the liver.
Okay. Okay, so let's reopen and take a look. Feel the heart? That would be actually a good idea, Hank. I can. So switching over to a transthoracic and seeing what I can see. So I can only get a short axis from what I have. Is there a short axis view of the heart for me right now? No TTE? Okay. So unfortunately, because he's ventilated, I'm not getting a good visual on the left ventricle. And I'm trying to do the four-chamber view. Because he's ventilated, I'm still having a hard time seeing anything, so we'll have to go like clinical and our plan only for now.
General views, no.
This is Dr. Barry on the phone. He's
I appreciate it. Is your speakerphone, Amanda? Oh, you got it? Hello, sir. How are you?
Really good.
Yes, we just did. I think what I want to do is go ahead with. Okay, I would love to go ahead with the 4 units of packed red, 4 units of FFP, and then the 4 units of 4 grams of the factor, please. And we also ordered an adult platelet pool. Excellent. Thank you very much, sir.
Dr. Barry?
Oh, sorry, Dr. Barry? So we're going to add another 4 units of packed red cells, 4 units of FFP, 4 grams of the factor that Dr. Barry recommended, as well as that adult platelet pool. And then we're going to see if this resolves. We also need to see if there's any other way we can continue to warm him. Sir, he has been paralyzed downstairs. 100 milligrams. Let's take a look. I haven't looked at his pupils yet. Good question. Looking at his pupils, they appear to be equal. Yes. Very good. Good check. Thank you, Brian. So, summarizing, we have chest tubes on both sides. We're giving lots of blood cells. It looks like he's using his blood work. Looks like he's heading towards coagulopathy. He's already there. Already there. Is there anything that we should be doing that we're not doing that comes to mind for anyone in the room?
Has the room temperature been raised?
Good thought. Let's raise the room temperature as high as it goes, please.
And we're only giving them warm product for the.
Only one product. Raising room temperature, please.
Got it, raising your temperature.
So again, checking in terms of this coagulopathy and our present treatment. Does anyone have any ideas that we haven't implemented? Anything on the checklist that we haven't done? Brilliant.
Room temperature is Michael.
Thank you. Pressure's okay. So pressures are good. Okay. And then, I guess, Kathy and Justin, how much have we transfused so far, and what are we waiting on?
I'm just saying, we're happy from a surgical standpoint. There's nothing more you want to do. The back is on, done. It's not pouring out blood. We've given everything we can. There's more on the way. It's time to go.
Okay.
You want to go to?
It's time to go.
So let's prepare for a transfer.
Let's be clear, so are we transferring, Kiwi to Brian?
We're going to the ICU. I'll take over MRP status at this point. We'll continue the resuscitation in the ICU. My focus in the ICU is to try and correct the plaque block. He will need to come back to the OR within a 24-hour period, so long as his physiology allows. I understand that there may, potentially based on mechanism, we haven't fully scanned him. He will need a CT head. He does not go to a CT head right now.
Okay. All right,
So we'll make sure that the blood product continues to follow, so that there's no discontinuation of the massive transfusion.
We are not stopping the massive hemorrhage protocol. We're not.
Okay.
We're vitals right now.
Vitals right now, to clarify, heart rate is 123, blood pressure is a mean of 65, 100 on 48, oxygen saturation is 95. And he's still on pressors, 0.1 to norepinephrine, 2.4 units per liter of the day, so doing well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Monitor is no longer on.
So, Ben, if you could just call down for a minute, let them know what, bed 10 is ready and waiting.
Oh, I see.
And just for all intents and purposes, are we actually going to need this right now?
We're not.
No. Okay. Do you want us to require the patient or?
We're,
Okay.
Wow. Sarah, I'll leave you for now to do a hot debrief, and I look forward to talking to you all in room 2050 shortly. Outstanding, y'all.
all right, so, Darren is talking about with respect to our cost. It's really bringing up.
Kind of fun to do, eh? It's actually kind of hard to follow. Yeah, make sure we're fine.
Something else. My son picked it up. Very good. Hope it goes well for you.
The live stream is still going. Just wait. I'm gonna mute it and just so you know, it's still going.
Darren, you want? Can I scan it? I want a copy of this.
I don't.
I might turn here.
Yeah, sure. Or maybe over here. Indicative. Thank you.
Straight line in a circle, the table's down the middle. You guys are like 3-year-olds.
Let's not have the award team at one end and us at one end. So can we like spread out?
Every other chair.
Every other chair.
Yeah, good idea.
I sit here next. Oh.
Yeah, you can't be excited.
Eric, you move over.
Our nose is
I know we're going to do it.
the same. Well, we weren't together writing, but we were both like.
As you know, they finished and they already just been plenty brief and they know we're waiting. We're happy.
Actually, it was kind of hard to recognize that Brian well.
I came in out in a bird.
Okay, what are you doing here? Get out of here.
I can just see him like.
He was in the back hallway there.
Oh, he
wasn't even move in here.
He wasn't. I've never seen him before.
I think this space separate those two. No, this happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
all of
he
that.
has no notes. Mine is for no notes. Mine is no notes.
I don't need no money.
That's what I wondered.
So much.
You know, some of us are slow and you like everything's it's like the wheels turn like this.
It's totally there the last 2 days. I know after a meeting today, I've been sent it to, I'll get sent to our leadership team and then we're gonna talk about it tomorrow.
So it's typically like water. They're all over the facial area. They haven't really got many of the testing kits up yet. It's all the facial areas. The facial area, you know, on COVID. The testing kit.
Yeah, always conversation that like needs to get a little bit more with Greg and Mike.
You know,
Yeah, it's depends on the person. Sometimes I tell them,
I want to see. You know,
Yeah, and that's what I said to him.
Oh, yeah.
Like 40 people charging into the always bad. Always bad.
Had all your.
Yeah, so it would way better. I don't want to be that kind
How do we put it back into the wall?
What's that?
The helmet, the brand new helmet.
The brand new helmet, Darren has. So have the brand new helmet.
No, that's different. They call it.
By the CDC.
Yeah. So,
Time to get creative. Everybody knows that. What?
Well, that's what they got the top and then connecting bridge.
But with the little shade spot for like a chop.
Oh my God, I can't believe that's
So looking at the picture.
You trying to follow your. I'm trying to pick which one my wife will hate the most. I think any of them, but one for me. I mean, the building fits minus my plan.
Yeah.
This is like one of those crowd.
Yes. What's funny is too, but like, I heard people commenting on the radio today, like, so that I can like, it's very cool.
I can't go there, I'm like down. You gotta do it.
At least they're talking about it, or maybe they're just like,
You took the ball. Whatever the delay, I still be hearing it. We drink the top.
This is very real to life, because if you call a surgeon and he says he's gonna be there at 15 or 20. This is a very good simulation.
It's all pretty mark. Very real. They're officially on their way.
I'm the oldest guy in the room, I just started handing over us.
How did you guys decide?
I'm the oldest guy, just started handing over
I
just said, here's my yellow, Sky, you're the Johnny or Brock, and I'm the old guy in the room, they said, okay, you do everything.
Took up 11 blade.
I saw it.
You say it in French?
I like how you not saying your name earlier. Like, there's no.
Not like how we say it.
Hubert.
Hubert. You know?
Hubert. I just like Hubert. Something crazy, or something you can't say. It's just they don't feel comfortable with the accent.
Well, you seem like
They're not great.
you're the one person that's saying it in like a thick French accent. Everybody else is speaking it in like Hubert.
Like Saint Hubert.
Like Hubert.
Like Saint Hubert. Like Saint Hubert's chicken in Quebec. He's from, yeah, chicken. Saint Hubert's chicken. Yeah. Oh, it's like Sure.
That your chicken?
My kids know it better. Oh my God.
What?
Saint Hubert was the
Yeah, but how's the song go?
god of hunters.
That's irrelevant. What we need to know right now is the
Well,
song.
The chicken song?
Saint Hubert's chicken. It's a competition with Quebec and Ontario. Showing. Yeah, I heard you. I know. Yeah. So whenever we go to Montreal, we teach the kids the song, and they know the song.
You should have written it down.
We can solve it. It's my notes. We can just pull up on YouTube. Yeah, we can solve this.
Can you sing it?
Well, I've been trying to get either Janet or Eric.
Which song are you talking
I don't know. Here it is.
Only a millennial would do that.
You separate them, separate them. Separate them.
You're forced into separation.
I think that's well.
So I just separate everybody. So I just separate people.
You're gonna pay 3 people. Beautiful. Like, artistic sketch of it was,
So everybody, I'd like to start. Oh, great. Excellent.
Some more chairs right here.
So, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. Thank you, everybody. That was quite a pleasure to watch. I got the privilege of watching it from start to finish, and I could actually hear, which I understand was a bit of a problem in here. So I'm sorry for that. Next time, hopefully we'll get it better. That said, we have a lot we can talk about. Tons we can talk about. Hey, welcome back. So what I think we'll do, please, is get a sort of high-level case summary from some of our key players. So can I ask you first to go down and give that little high-level case review from Emerge experience, please. And then I'll look to, yes, please. Good thought. Should we start with Perrin?
You're looking for.
Just a quick, yeah, how did your initial sort of role and what happened?
Like I said, we had a very small piece of it. I mean, it was quick, like I said, the review in our debrief was about 15-second summary of what happened, a little bit, and handoff. It was nice that TTL asked for that 15 seconds, so I could really find what was going on. And what we talked about is that we do have a clamshell equipment on there that seems to always get tangled up with others trying to help us, and just let us get rid of that equipment.
Thank you. And Doug, you come up with a long list of things we can do differently and things that went well. Thank you for that. Acknowledge that from get-go. Can you give a high-level of the case review
So
for us?
basically, 35-year-old healthy male brought in by EMS after a high velocity motorcycle collision with another car, and came in right off the bat hemodynamically unstable. You know, not so much altered. He had like a GCS of 13. And we actually rapidly identified that he had a left-sided hemopneumothorax, and his spleen was just floating in blood. So we, you know, with the vitals and everything, we identified hemorrhagic shock, and then called for the MHP pretty quickly. TXA was given by the paramedics already, so that was good. And we just started the second infusion, and then basically the patient, as we were, you know, decompressing the chest, asking for blood, decompensated. He was already coagulopathic and hypothermic in the trauma bay. There was, you know, a little issue with the blood product arriving, and I think it was just a technical paper thing.
Yeah, that'll come up, I'm sure.
So we were kind of, you know, chasing our tail, trying to act on those hemodynamics, and you know, we didn't want to give too much fluid because we didn't want to dilute the patient, and you know, pressors for us as Emerge docs, it's hard to do that call because it's not the actual guidelines of ATLS and what we do, but at the same time, you got a young male who's kind of dying in front of you, and blood is not coming. So, and then anesthesiology is going to transit to the OR. So if Presser needs to be on board, you know, we can take that decision as a team because we didn't have access to the blood product as, you know, we would. It would have been nice to have
procedures as well that were done as well.
Yeah, procedure, so chest decompression. And then once there was a decline in the GCS, we needed to check the airway. So we did opt for an intubation with inline stabilization and with ketamine to, you know, maintain a decent hemodynamic profile.
Pretty good. Thank you.
And
the next sort of words and summary come from you, if you'd be so kind.
So came down to the emergency room, was informed that they were concerned about the airway, joined them at the head of the bed while continue the resuscitation. Ultimately, did a quick scope to make sure that there was no tracheal disruption. Cognizant that he had blood on his ears, but again, I want to make sure that like he's had a motorcycle accident. If you go to intubate without fully visualizing that trachea and there's tracheal disruption and you put it in a mediastinum, end of game. So that's why I did the scope. After that, easy glide scope intubation. There was difficulty with the art line. There was conversation about whether or not we should continue with crystalloids. The pressure was dropping. Instead, we started to begin the pressors to try and keep a mean so that we could have perfuse organs as we go. Blood products arrived. We decided to like 2 and go. We came up to the operating room. Transfusion protocol continued. He ended up getting 4 units of packed red cells, 4 units of FFP. Thank you. We also were able to go through the massive transfusion checklist. Dr. Castor did a fantastic job of doing that. Sarah made sure everything was set up. We eventually did get an art line. We were able to communicate with the hematology pathologist, and as the case progressed, see that he was developing coagulopathy. I think throughout the case, we were able to summarize what was going on to each other, and again, do our best to try and mitigate that coagulopathy as we went. Late things of the party might have been increasing the temperature of the room as we were coming up from downstairs, as opposed to starting that later. He did have a pneumothorax during the case, and we had to place a right-sided chest tube that was identified following the packing. I think there was very good communication between surgery and anesthesiology. Hope that wasn't too overbearing, Dr. Jameson. But otherwise, I mean, at some point, I was concerned about a transfusion reactions because we're running a transfusion, but that actually would have helped us because then his temperature would have come up. It did not occur. Because I was like, wait a minute, transfusion reaction, we need a temperature for that.
Thank you. I think I'll ask Fred if there's anything you want to add as well, and then the man in the corner is Brian Wells. If you have Karen, I the child. Ask me if you want to add.
I will discuss something more, which will kind of, I can try and talk about that, but I think it was, yeah, it was recognized earlier that we need to go to the OR, positive, fast, unstable. There's no other place that the patient needs to go. I think the communication was good. I agree with the OR. Once we got there, everyone was ready and we had a plan, good communication. I think that's important. Anticipating that there's going to be a drop, about the accident, and then the plans for what we're going to do once we're in there, and communicating to allow the anesthesia to catch up, and then a plan from the OR where you can go, and then plan to ICU, and then the plan to come back. So doing the necessary things first, the speed is, it's easy to manage, and then deliver to pack, because that's because of these coagulopathy. There's not much more you're going to do and allow resuscitation.
Thank you.
He's so humble, right? He says it's easy to manage. He manages it easily. He makes it, for the rest of us, it's hard.
You look into his eyes, and it's like the first time we listened to the
It's true. It's like having to operate. Just like you don't look at it. So just a couple points, and I wasn't there to start in the immersion. I'm sorry for that, but I was there lurking, and I walked in to the side room, and I heard the words, "Patient needs to go to the OR." I saw that Dr. Jacobson was at the emerge, and then I set the timer on my phone, and I listened to comments about how we were waiting for blood. The blood was coming. The art line didn't work. We talked about some vasopressin, some norepinephrine, and we're going to the OR, and then we're going to the OR, and then we were still going to the OR. So it was 8 minutes. It was 8 minutes, right, between the time that I was lurking and the patient actually left at 18:56. And the only reason I highlight that is because in your mind, if you're in a trauma, in the trauma bay, have a mental clock in your brain. Because you don't, and maybe have some triggers in your brain. Should a patient in hemorrhagic shock ever be held up in the trauma bay for an art line? The answer is no. Should we ever be arguing about pressor doses? The answer is no. If blood is not forthcoming, and you're sitting there in the trauma bay, and you've got a positive fast, and you've got a surgeon, where should we wait for that blood? In the OR. It's really, really hard to do. But if that patient came in with an axe wound to their antecubital fossa, and there was blood squirting across the room, it would take you 14 seconds to recognize where the bleeding was coming from, and probably 3 minutes to apply a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. Right? During the 20 minutes that they're in, between the time that's recognized the bleeding into their belly, to the point where they get somewhere where they can stop the bleeding is ongoing. It's really, really hard. But the algorithm is hemorrhagic shock. I've identified where they're bleeding. Let's go. That's the algorithm.
Thank you. Why don't we go back to emerge and hear from one of the nurses who feels like they might have been sort of a bit of a leadership role, so I might identify as you, Joe, as someone charted. Yeah. Summary from your perspective? Nursing summary.
It felt really chaotic and whatnot, and normally we would have somebody order entry stuff, especially for major chem exclusively, and somebody else do the charting. So you really can't do both of those. So I put aside the charting because you can always catch up and do the order entry stuff for
Yeah. And I think there were a couple of challenges that we had in this mock for getting things done fast and ordering and doing it well. And so a lot of the delays, I think, were just the nature of it being a mock. You didn't get what you needed in the lab. So I don't think we can blame our runner for that any more than we can blame the computer. I think that was the nature of the mock. Like you said, maybe us not having a dedicated person. But probably a slew of lessons learned there about both how to practice this, but also what happens in the real world we'll have to unpack. That said, let's stay in emerge for another moment. And anyone else who's in emerge who wants to share particular some things that they feel went well, or some things that they feel could have gone differently.
I'm Evan, I'm your team. I just want to say it was nice having a whole team of physicians at the head of the bed with me, having somebody that was dedicated to that, so that I knew that I could kind of manage equipment and do other things while somebody else was managing the airway. That was really helpful since we didn't have a secretary in this situation. The complaint every single time, I think probably everybody's experienced this, is that there's so many people, there's so much equipment, that being able to get stuff in and out from the bedside, especially for me, if I've got multiple cameras, I have a scope, I have a bronchoscope at the bedside, being able to get them in and out from the patient's bedside so that the practitioner at the head of the bed could see was very difficult. So being able to communicate that I needed that space, and then as soon as it was unnecessary, get stuff out of the way. If you use an ultrasound and you're done looking at the chest, out of the way, right? Give it another 2 meters to the side so we can bring something else in for the next step. That just makes all that kind of stuff a lot faster. It takes me an extra 30 seconds here and extra 30 seconds there. I'm having to move other stuff.
Thank you. Interested in hearing other voices from emerge as well. Before we do that, I wonder if we can transition to Kathy and Dustin, who were in emerge and then of course in the OR. And if you could focus first, if you would, please, on that sort of time from emerge before you arrived in the OR door. So in emerge and perhaps in transport, and we'll save the OR conversation for just a few moments from now.
You want to go first? No, you go. The 8-minute window thing that you're referring to. I'm a little bit. I remember asking like, what's the definitive? Like, where are we going? Like, what's the plan? And I don't recall like what was happening in between there or what that delay was. I'll check the replay. But I'm curious to see what that was. But I like the positive in all this thing is like communication was good. Yeah. Everybody was geared to the focus of the benefit of that patient. I felt like everybody was safe to speak up. Everybody worked together. My colleague emerging nurses and docs in there, everybody was receptive. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everybody, like that was impressive. I love watching this stuff and being a part of it. So kudos to the same people for creating such a world that we could play in and still learn from each other. But yeah, I thought Emerge did a fantastic job. Like minor things and feedback, like temperature. We always do that. Temperature seems to be our like #1 thing we forget about. And I felt like I was kind of communicating with Kathy about like positioning. We kind of had to talk about where to put the Ranger before we left, and yeah, like Kevin, you popped in the catheter, Kevin grabbed the norepi, and we were kind of on our way.
Do a catheter.
We didn't do a catheter.
Okay.
I'm like telling everybody upstairs, I'm like, no, Merge put in a catheter. It's in there. It's
If
being-
we put a catheter, it'd be 9 grams.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess I need to acknowledge please that Dr. Barry is on the speakerphone, so just so you're aware. Thank you for joining us. Sorry to interrupt. Do something else you wanted to before Kathy chimes in?
No, I think that's it. I think there was really good orchestration of all specialties and services in here, and I think everybody was extremely respectful and communicated well.
Thank you. Kathy, want to add anything from that?
I thought there was great communication between the nurses in the ER, like where we were at with blood products and who was doing what and what their role was and where to put the equipment. That sorted out. The only thing would be like, I guess, troubleshooting on when we realized that the blood wasn't there, like, okay, so let's go down the line and figure out where the barrier is for why the blood isn't here. And I don't think that actually happened until we were almost ready to leave for the OR. And I think that probably should have happened a lot earlier.
Sure.
And seeing where the breakdown in communication was with the lab, what they needed to get that blood there. Yeah.
That's a really nice segue. I really do think that this is the nature of our simulation, and that's Nancy, Mitzi comments about what happened and what should have or could have.
So what didn't happen was any order for any blood product. We received nothing. So the MHP overhead occurred, but there was no phone call to say this is MHP, this is our patient. But that's our first thing. Who's the patient? What's their name? MRN, and who's the doctor? We had none of that information. I actually initiated the call into emergency, got into the trauma room to say, we have no blood product order, you guys need stuff. And then Darren called and said, yeah. So we, from the MHP that we heard at 1628, we put plasma into thaw. Our first 2 units went out at 1845. Way too long, but we basically let our own initiation. We have nothing. There's still that trail of CPOE orders or fax orders that we didn't get. So
I'll just add, I think there's a cynism there for sure,
Yeah.
because I know that at 1825, Joe correctly ordered the
there's
product.
nothing in there.
And then we added additional products afterwards when the problem was identified. So that piece of it is a cynism.
Yeah.
I think it's worth, Darren will take us through the
Yeah.
conversation about the learning that comes from this is still valuable in terms of what we do when there are other problems. So that's a cynism in the play domain that we can't avoid.
Yeah, and same with the orders, the blood test orders. It all went in as one huge accession number. So when I tried to log it in, like I think that's a simulation.
Yeah.
So I just went in and started ordering stuff for myself so I could put some results in and order products and put some stuff in.
A phone call was made though, and a fax was made, and unfortunately that person's not here, so I'd like to clarify where they phoned to. I'll do that afterwards, but that's unfortunate that that piece of the communication broke down the fail safe.
Thank you. Thank you. I wonder, Mitzi, if you have something to add?
I was just watching, so
Right.
it's in the.
And I am sure.
Thank you. So I think noise. So thank you for that. And again, I acknowledge we did all this in a play domain that was not used to doing any of the things we did tonight. So in essence, like I said before, we're testing how to test.
Yeah,
and this is what we're learning.
Unfortunately,
so that's anything else you want to add, and that's what you guys.
It's part of the play is we have no ability to print. So we were handwriting stuff that we wouldn't normally do, which was slowing us down, trying to get that minimal information on products. So if we did it in this, we'd probably pre-do it. So we actually did put out the 12 RPCs, 8 frozen plasma, 1 platelet, and we're on our way from 1 RPCs and fibrinogen on Dr. Barry's order. So that in that time frame.
Fantastic. Before I ask Dr. Barry for your thoughts, Dustin, there's something
I just wanted to say that like this isn't a new thing where there's a delay in the blood. It's been common at codes that aren't even MHP, just where we want like 2 units of ONA. And what I highly encourage is that we make that phone call with the lab. And that's why I was at. This is why I'm like hearing this thing like, where was the blood? And I'm asking Sherry to call. Can you call the lab? And the response I was getting was the blood's on its way. The blood's on its way. So I just want to be clear that when the blood doesn't show up, we need to figure that out. But I guess the cynism and whatever else.
Thank you. So lots of people want to chat now. It's going to be interesting. I did mention though that I would ask Dr. Barry what his thoughts were. And so I'm going to do that next, acknowledging. So Dr. Barry, I don't know if you can hear these comments or hear me, but if you're able to provide some thoughts on this, it would be appreciated.
Garrett, I just assumed that that initial sort of absence of exports to the lab was just a complication of this being a mob, perhaps.
Yes.
Because I'm not actually, it's not typical of MHPs up there. They're usually, MHPs ordered and we get blood ordered and things run along quite smoothly. So I'm not particularly exercised about that, although the next simulation that we do, and hopefully do these at other hospitals as well, as you know, as we bring MHP into Calgary District and Campbell River, et cetera. Using that, so that'd be a lesson learned. And the point made in the sort of mock domain, some of these little things need to be cleaned up so it matches the way it should be. But from my point of view, I do what I would normally do, and that is get the call from the blood bank, call down to emerge, and then follow that patient along in the background. The blood products are going out and the lab work that's being generated, and then volunteer push through to wherever the patient is, either still in emerge or into the OR, with advice if it appears to be needed. And with the caveat that through the blood bank or the lab, the clinical side can always phone us or get us by asking the lab to have us page immediately, and we respond that way. So I don't have much more to say. I mean, this was a sort of a funny clinical scenario where the initial lab work went from not great to incredible, terrible coagulopathy in what was a artificially very short period of time. And so I'm not sure it's worth saying that things should be different from a blood product management point of view. I think using the 2 red cells to 1 plasma to 1 unit of platelets, which is in fact equivalent to 5, so 5 units of blood. Using that formula in the initial phases of resuscitation is exsanguinating hemorrhage, or in this particular case, a patient who could have probably predicted, because of the whole trauma, was going to be coagulopathic or hypothermic, and multiple trauma. To use that formula until you get some ability to use guided therapy by the frequent lab testing is just the way to go in this day and age. And I think it's set up that way. So.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very much. I'll just share with you a lot of nods of heads while you were speaking, and they weren't falling asleep. I feel genuine agreement with a lot of the things that you said. I wanted to call out, before we sort of go back into the room, an incredible amount of products were moved throughout the building. And I want to thank you very much for doing that. Quite a task. I mean, I think the material porter in the major image protocol is an unsung hero. And we didn't make it easy for you tonight because there was all kinds of hiccups that weren't real that ultimately, landed on your shoulders. So thank you for bearing that weight. And then you kept showing up and announcing that you had more products somehow. I don't know how.
They won't say.
Something happened over there. Yeah, what happens in San Diego. So yes,
That person or persons doing that running is absolutely the critical person from our point of view in lab and blood bank, like core lab and blood bank again.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Brought by and blood products is, that's where the decreasing turnaround time is accomplished, particularly with blood products. With CPOE, the orders get to us, in an instant. It's the delivery of the blood products that's critical. So that position, as we bring MHP to other sites, has to be appreciated as absolutely critical.
Thank you for that again.
Thank
Lots
you.
of smiles and,
Thank you very much.
and thank you very much.
Yeah.
Justin, and let's go down to the other room. I think we need to also hear from Drew and Sarah and Jody. So,
Just a really quick point on that, because I have some other stuff to talk about. Perfect. But on the aspect of the porters, a very similar simulation like this happened at the UBC hospital 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not sure exactly the case, but it was a massive transfusion. And they recognized that the porter was maybe the biggest limiting factor for the delivery of blood products to the emergent and to the operating room. And a system change was made where they increased to always have 2 material porters on call in the hospital at all times to deal with this one issue. I don't know if that's something that could be happening here, but that was a change that happened from a sim exactly like this.
Thank you, Jim. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking, so like, that must have been stressful to be the two people trying, like for you guys, that must have been awful to be sitting there sweating, trying to figure out how to get
It is.
people out. So I'm just thinking as a fail safe, I know we're trying to move away from paper, and paper's not the solution. But I would like to put forward the thought that when do we get stickers for the patient in the trauma bay?
So when an MHP is ordered, we get a form that has patient identifiers on it that the porter comes to emerge, and they take it and they run to the lab.
Right.
And so they are going with a piece of paper, and that
The
piece of paper
fail-safe
is what we need. So that part happened.
Okay, so that part happened, and then the weight was the play system?
Yeah.
Wasn't ordered. And
And you need both or one and like?
You need both.
And in production, which is the EHR we use, this problem doesn't happen. So
Right.
again, this is a simulation issue.
Okay.
And so it took us it was 20 minutes from time MHP was ordered until the first blood product came,
Okay.
just so we all know what the time
Say that
was. 20 minutes.
And normally it's 7 minutes.
Great.
Blood within 7 minutes.
Yeah. So, okay, some, as Jody calls it.
And you guys can't release that blood until you have that computer
We need
thing.
a patient identifier, whether that's an unknown or whatever.
Right.
That's where the phone call of patient we get started, so we can start that process.
That's all I wanted to clarify, thank you.
Okay.
Question for Dr. Berry. If we hear from EHS that we have a multi-trauma patient who's hypotensive and almost clearly hypovolemic shock, can we order blood without a name O negative to be start to prepare so that it can come even sooner to our trauma room?
Did you hear the question, Dr. Berry?
I did.
Yeah.
We have no problem getting home negative blood ready to roll, but we need the identifier. And so we also know that the ability for you guys to identify the patient and actually deliver, the unidentified registration coding is fast enough that once that's done, you get the blood sent down immediately thereafter. So we do not here package up unidentified blood, undesignated blood and send it anywhere. And these are investigations that Victoria General and the Jubilee have shown that the amount of time that it takes in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes, once that patient is being identified, the identification process should be extremely quick, especially if you're not trying to pull a wallet out of a pocket and identify that way. You just designate the patient, trauma patient, or however you guys do your unidentified patients.
So we have 2 options.
So no, don't pre-prepare and send quotes unidentified patients down anywhere in the hospital.
So, Joni, you got a thought, I think, as well, just to sort of set the course trajectory the next little bit. Joni, I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to hear from Drs. Delaney and Drs. Hall as well. I'm also going to acknowledge we're doing really well for time. And so one of the things I think I might do is invite people to maybe work in groups after we hear from you 3. Maybe do a little small group. What went well? What could we do differently? To take the small group stuff and bring it to the room at large is something I'm thinking of. So that said, Joni, Dr. Hall, Dr. Delaney.
Yeah, so just regarding this issue of having blood product available to us sooner. If ambulance phones in and gives us the name and birth date, we can pre-triage, and we are doing this with our stroke patients now. We can also triage them as an unidentified patient. The question is, can lab release blood to us for a patient that's not yet in the building?
That's pretty risky because they don't always get the information right.
Yeah.
So
we can go with the unidentified process.
We can start the pre-arrival and be ready and alert them, and then just tweak it with positive identifiers when they come in. You know what I mean? Sometimes the year is wrong, like, I don't know, that just seems.
We've
We
done it
can
before.
triage them
I
as
know
an
we've
ID
done
and then merge it over, but that merge doesn't happen until after the patient is discharged, so we wouldn't then be able to access any of the chart history. So using the unidentified patient does mean that we lose our ability to see the history of the patient, but we can, in certain instances, pre-triage them and you can adjust the time. This isn't something that we're doing often in emerge, certain people are, that you can actually set the time to arrive 10 minutes from now if you're confident that they are holding the card in their hand and looking at the patient and it is that patient. But then we're not following necessarily all of our agency protocols on positive patient ID. So would this be an exception that we're willing to take that?
So I'm gonna ask Dr. Murray thoughts on this one. So the conversation in the room is the risk of not having positive patient ID, and one of our nurses identified, getting it wrong, versus another colleague suggesting, well, hold on, what about pre-arrival with an unidentified patient, and would that get us products too?
It's a little bit of a long and drawn and complicated issue to kind of do this on the phone, quite frankly. So,
Okay, fair.
I think it probably should be heard up.
Okay, thank you. Duly noted. So on that note, Dr. Hall, Dr. Delaney, thoughts?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch base briefly on a couple things that came up in our hot debrief before we break into the small group debriefs or whatever the next stage is going to be. So one thing that I think we should highlight in the communication has already been talked about, so we won't belabor that. But I do think one thing that was very helpful that I heard was really thorough summaries from Dr. Pino directing the next stage of the resuscitation. So it was clear what had happened and what was anticipated to happen next. And I thought that was good. And from hearing from Dr. Wells in the past, those summaries are only helpful if they direct the next stage. And I think that's important to highlight the fact that it wasn't just a summary for the sake of a summary. It was a summary saying, and now what is next? So I just wanted to highlight that as a communication thing that I thought went really well.
Fast in the communication throughout the evening.
And then the other things that came up in a couple different ways in our quick hot debrief was about this discussion, which happens every time we do one of these sims, and in real life, is leadership or MRP or who's giving orders when other specialists arrive in the trauma room. And this is always an interesting debate and discussion because we had general surgery and anesthesia show up in the trauma room. Sometimes it's ICU who shows up in the trauma room. Those are the usual suspects, maybe ENT. And so that's always an interesting play of when does MRP status change, who's giving orders, because I know that it can be very confusing for the nurses. And so this was expressed from the nursing staff. I was confused of who I was listening to as team leader. And so I just think that I just kind of wanted to put that on the table and just.
Yeah, thank you. That was in my notes too. I'm going to just note that on a few more than one occasion, there might be 2 or 3 times, Justin clarified who is in charge of that, who is, and so I'm going to call that up. Thank you, Justin. That said, hey, Dr. Hall or Drew, is there anything else you wanted to say before we?
I think that we can go into some of the minutiae of management in a little bit. Maybe we should do that in small group, because there's discussion about pressors and crystalloids and trauma when blood is delayed. And I think that there was lots of questions and debate about that too that I think we should talk about at some point.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sarah.
In terms of what we talked about in our mini debrief, timing, I think, was the main thing that we should all take home today. So first off, the timing and urgency for that patient to get from emerge to the OR. But then once the surgery component is finished, and we've really done all that we can do in the operating room, there's also then a timing consideration to move that patient out of the OR down to ICU, where the continued resuscitation can carry on, with the knowledge that that patient is coming back to the operating room within the next 24 hours for definitive surgery. So I just wanted to highlight that discussion, the timing in both sites.
Or transport. I start with that, or transport. So we have to always think about, like, is this patient to stay in our building? Because often we get patients to the ICU and they're not for this building. So this guy had a mechanism of injury for considerable result, head injury or spinal injury. This is not the place to be mucking about with neuro or spine injuries, as long as they're stabilized.
Right. So another thing that came up in our debrief was the triad of death, which this patient was clearly at risk for. So hypothermia, acidosis, and dilutional coagulopathy. So he had received lots of blood products. He was in a position where he was dying, and met the criteria for all three of those components. So just a recognition that that this patient was really in dire straits. I think we'll probably leave it at that. And also the discussion, as Drew mentioned, crystalloid pressors, blood products, we can talk about perhaps in our smaller groups.
Thank you. Rich conversations, lots of observations. I wonder before we break up into some smaller groups, some of the people I just want to touch base with are our CNEs. So Aaron, Janet, Joni, we're here. Do anything you want to add as from your perspective as observers?
So I was one of the CNEs with you when we initiated MHP at NRGH, and just following the sequence of events that should happen when it's ordered, I don't fully follow. I saw great work, but I think we need to do a tabletop of the sequence of events in ordering an MHP, because if we actually did, aside from the Platoing not working, if we actually did the 3 pillars that happened on the initiation, so the doctor says we're initiating MHP, the charge nurse then says, could someone go to transfusion medicine to let them know this is the MRN and the date of birth, and if that's, after that happens, we do the overhead page. So transfusion doesn't hear the overhead page and not know who it is. So then they're able to do the background work.
There was no charge nurse in this case.
So it's
that fundamental step was missing.
Yeah.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
So I think one of the remark Kathy made earlier, when did we start fixing the problem? Arguably, that was the time we should have started.
Yeah. So just, I truly believe maybe tabletop to just see how it seamlessly goes electronically.
Aaron.
I'm always kind of in the background, kind of helping the flow of everything going. I think probably I would need to talk to the nurses who were in the room in the moment, get their point of view.
Yeah, we'll hear from Jody. Awesome, thank you. Jody?
I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about getting into the communication aspects, into the closed loop. I know that was called out at one time by anesthesia. So I think that there's a lot to be said around those discussions about role and about closing the loop and about having clear lines of communication so that things happen. I don't know if we want to talk about that here, if we want to take that down to the smaller level. So I'll leave that to the group to answer.
Cool. I'm going to propose, colleagues, that we take 10, 15 minutes. Let's say when the big hand is on the 7. So when the big hand is on the 7, what I'm going to invite, so right now, let's break up into small groups. 3, probably a decent number, and have a conversation. And please generate some thoughts about things that went well and or systems improvements. Where in this case did you see things that can be improved? There's a sort of graphic illustrating some of the ideas that might help solve. And then specific safety concerns that you think we should log and start thinking about safety issues, improvements, that kind of thing in small groups. And then we'll go around and hear from everyone else in the room. So how does that sound? Safety issues, systems issues, try to generate a bit of a list. Sort of take small groups, bring them to the large shorty. So I'll leave it up to you to self-organize. And Brian has emailed to say, thank you, everybody. He has to bug out to answer pages. Maybe something we don't. So that being said, there we go. So please break up into small groups. We'll regroup again, depending on, maybe, the big cat on the set.
It's like this ongoing, every
it was really hard to hear for us here what was going on in the OR. Was there a discussion of additional type of surgery that kind of thought, okay, screw it, like let's just back and go, or like how did that happen? The patient was like a hell of a lot more stable, but is there a possibility one surgery or that never?
So it has to be like 2 units, small practices, or you can call it. Right. Something non-operative. You're going to know why you're like, and you always ask questions. What's the pressure? You gotta guess.
Like yeah, otherwise it's like we're doing damage control.
What's the worst thing that happens? Hey, good job.
The question that you asked who's confused me here in terms of emergency. I think, I mean, right now, from a trauma perspective, it should be a TTL. It should be a TTL in order to see orchestrated all the different but from that point, yeah. But you got my question. You know it's going to be possible. Yeah. You know he's not going to be possible. You know what? I don't like that. Yeah. So, how you build your culture. My team is not true. You can't tell me how I'm saying, right? You can tell me where he's like, now uncomfortable and have to hand it over. I can tell him where I'm like, I can take it to your trip, but I don't know about this other stuff. Like, if you do this, and that. But if you use the processes together, start to recognize. Very well, very hands-on. Only concern with the comment that I brought up is exactly what you said. It's like very stressful. He has a big personality. You know him as and his life interaction. Did you feel like he stepped on you and he said, no, like I was TTO. He had a plan for innovate. I was cool with that. I'll do my thing. But I do think that some of the nurses are like, yeah,
The message I would say is, we're not going to offend anybody. If you as a nurse was a bedside, or you as an anesthesiologist was a bedside, you're not sure. I want to say
Hold on a second, guys. Who's running the show? Yeah, I don't care. Just who's running the show. Every time you and I look at each other, and you have a long leg. I'm still not right. You get going. And then you're like, I'm good now. Can I hand over? And we have that conversation out in the open. So everyone hears it.
And I think that's probably the best way to do it. Ideally, that would happen. Or we would say, I'm still in charge. Mike is gonna take care of the airway. He's gonna give direction for airway management. He's gonna do that. When he's done, let's get Mike our attention for now. And then I'm gonna hand over to the airway. I wanted to bring it up one more time.
And he asked me at the end, he was like, okay, so one of the ICU, are you tracking? You taking over, or you going to ICU, or where are we going? I hear what you're saying. You don't have a full spectrum right now. So the going to the ICU, going to the resuscitation, so much data. The CT head.
Would you be talking a little bit about that? Like with the blood, whatever, and pressors and trauma, that's
my approach. The literature is not very strong. First of all, he's got all answers. And again, what are you treating? What is it not the 65? Why? That's septic shock, right? You got hemorrhage shock. Can you feel it all? If I had to bear, if I had to do something, if I could be 6 months old,
what was your, I didn't hear what you were up to in there. Where you're saying I did you, or were you with Pastor and Pastor?
Yeah.
Like putting it outside? I couldn't see what you were actually doing.
So they did the same thing in person. They do that over there.
Seconds and again. I just wasn't sure if you would be more either like hands-on and doing the outline and getting the prep stuff ready, or if you would be more in the management part of the where you would call Pitty and in the chest tube in that situation or decompression, would that typically be surgeon that does that? Or
I don't actually think it. Just get it.
So I just wasn't sure where the drink would be a lot easier for anesthesia or whatever.
Yeah, so the drain and the traditional laparotomy, something like that, because you never know if you have it's always like
That's probably going to be surgery. Yeah. I see how we're passing it.
in that situation, I'm expecting surgery. It has to have two surgery. It doesn't all work. Why didn't you want this actually happened first? My second
and you guys are one there, and you did like 90 there. You got You need that more skilled kids. That's it. I around the pipe there. It's awesome. We've never had this. We've never had that. So one of the reasons we did have never done that, but I thought
You know what's great? Like, right there, you can't find anything for the year. It's gonna say something like, they're running MHP, they're
This is it. This is it. Even Darren would know it. So the culture here is that learning.
Thank you for what it read like a loss of rich conversation. I appreciate it. Because I want to know how fantastic it was. People weren't in their usual group, except for a couple of people. But for the most part, I saw people who I don't think usually hang out and talk to each other, which is probably worth the price. So what I'd like to do now is just go around the room, please, and have someone from each one of your groups, if you could, share with the rest of us some of the things you talked about, and particularly identifying process improvements, opportunities for change, process improvements, opportunities for change, safety threats, that kind of thing, things that we can fix. Sounds good? So why don't we start right here and we'll go around the room.
So I think the one thing we talked about is in the operating room, anytime I order a blood product, I like to put that order through, make sure it's through, and then I like to call through the lab, the blood bank, and say, do you see what I see on my screen? And I think anytime the reason I do that is because in London, Ontario, there was a patient where electronic orders were entered, and that wasn't checked up on, a delay resulted, that person had enough energy and died. I'm not saying they wouldn't have died if that hadn't happened, but the extra 12 minutes that went into things instead of having things immediately available didn't help. And so I would say with the electronic health record, there still has to be that human element of, I'm seeing on my screen what I need to see. Are you seeing on your screen what you need to see? And then you move forward. It doesn't necessarily have to be the doctor ordering. I feel better about doing it because that's my practice. But then there you are. Downstairs, trauma team, different deal. But there needs to be the human element of, your lab, your blood bank, this is what I have, and back and forth. And I think if that's built into the system, that could be helpful.
Thank you. Let's carry on around the room. Kevin was there, did he leave yet?
So,
yeah, we just go through some of the leave.
So, one of the things we reflected upon is although we kind of were in a play environment and we blame that for our slow blood, in our real life in trauma, we have waited many times for slow blood. It's a reality of our world. And so, to kind of understand better the three prongs of the major hemorrhage protocol that I never understood before, and some of those necessary steps. Like you say, the phone call, as docs and nurses, we're too busy sometimes to make that phone call. And it goes onto the unit clerk to make that phone call. But we never, sorry?
Sorry, it's not on their list. Yeah.
So we, but and that was our next statement, is that our room was very doctor heavy, but we actually didn't have enough nurses. We didn't have a charge nurse.
Yeah.
And so the reality of our trauma room, where we quite often are waiting for blood and standing around and not, and the standard of care is to avoid the triad of death and to not hemodilute them, but you stand around and you're waiting for blood. And so if we call for hot stroke 10 minutes, shouldn't we be calling for major hemorrhage protocol 10 minutes and doing those same sort of things when we noticed 8 minutes that was took to get to the OR? There was lots of time lost, and that's not just a play problem.
Yeah.
That's our real life problem.
Yeah.
And so to now better understand major hemorrhage protocol and some of those things that need to happen and how important that step is of that phone call, and possibly to even pre-call major hemorrhage protocols and possibly have anticipations of hypotensive trauma patients and possibly make them, Dr. Berry says that's not a problem for them in Victoria. Well, in our real life, it is a problem for us. And so maybe we will start to sometimes create unidentified patients and let the lab know ahead of time, and it's all ready, and as soon as they arrive, because we don't have a charge nurse, we have nurses that are busy at the bedside, they're busy getting drugs, we don't have somebody to actually enter that for us.
Thank you. So I would add, I think it's a really clear observation here, the lack of a charge nurse. There is a CSO in the building who did come to the bedside and attend our event. And that was another person that could have played that role. I'm just making a note of that because I've never seen a CSO in the trauma room like that. Or not, I shouldn't say that, but there was an opportunity there for that. Cool, thank you. Tim, would you carry on around the room?
I think actually I can give something a little bit too. I think that even though our role is basically in a short introduction, I reflect that to what we're involved in spending time with onset of accident and how our role is to decrease scene time and try to move that patient as quickly as possible. And that TRIAD, one of the things we've been told we're aware of is keeping that patient warm. And I think it's something we don't do a good job at right now. And quite often we're shorthanded in the back of the kids too. You may be one, if we're lucky, 2 of us. And if they're really lucky, we get 3 and we got somebody to be able to get that phone call. Phone call's not easy for us to do. Sometimes getting the blood pressure on that patient alone is difficult to do because we're also taking blood pressure along the way. Well, you may get weak radial pulses. Yeah, that's what you might get. Trauma, weak radial pulses. So being able to get that card out and say, this is the patient, this is his birthday, and this is his PHN, we'll strive for it. I don't know how likely that's going to be. So if we can do something about an unidentified patient prior, we can notify the major protocol coming in. Like you said, like a hot stroke, we're more than happy to do that. I think that's something that we should be doing. So,
yeah, if you've never been in the back of an ambulance, try it. The whole other world.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, there's limited space. Yeah, I think there's something else we identified too, is a bit of a transfer of care from emerge to OR. How do I emerge? There's maybe a tend to transfer of care at some point there too.
Thank you for that. Something in the back that you guys want to share?
And a great point, which Michael has already done.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, like during our appointment, I was from the lab for all the blood products, but I wasn't the one ordering the blood products. So I was relying on Sarah, hopefully, that she was at the front or putting the orders in, but I wasn't sure it was always happening. So I don't know that maybe we could change something up in our role, the roles in the OR, like how we did that. It just seems really confusing for me. Like we need, I think, for us in the OR, a bit better of our role clarification on our circulating nurses and what exactly we should be doing so that we're not crisscrossing paths or doing things twice. I did think we had very good close with communication in the OR. That was something that we did really well, but.
Sounds like an opportunity to explore.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good. Are you guys all together?
Yeah.
Yeah, we really like the role identification and emerge. I think in the OR there's ICU, there's circulators, and it's sometimes hard to identify who's doing what. And it might be something we could look into it in the OR to have some visual
Thank you.
Particularly for like the major hemorrhage clinical nurses, like the ICU nurses, because that's ones that we don't normally see.
Right. Really noted. Process improvement opportunity then.
And just as from like a supply code perspective, there are a couple of times where it seemed like there are certain ideas that are being circulated for certain things that might be done. So it was really helpful for me was when, a doctor or whatever, someone specifically said, hey, we're gonna do this, can you get out this bin? Or whatever, just, being very specific of when something's actually gonna be happening. So there are a couple of times that there are things that were being said, but I couldn't really tell exactly what was going on. So just to have, someone specifically say, this is what we're doing, can you get this? That's really helpful.
What supply attendant best?
Yeah, that was inside out, I noticed afterwards.
Okay.
That's awesome, thank you. Great, thank you for that. Moving through the room.
Yeah, you just spoke about sometimes difficult when it's And there's so many people in this room, someone doctor, maybe taking the responsibility, and it can be an intimidation factor when you merge and then, it's easier also when they're qualified to do the area, but not, at that moment, they're just as good as capable. So sometimes they can waste time, right? Like, we should be able to do it.
The other thing is, Fred and I, we know that he has to go to the OR, but nobody's actually calling the shot. Like, okay, we're stopping the useless intervention here, and we're going to the OR. But like, it's kind of, hey, Fred, he needs to go to the OR.
Being more assertive.
Yeah. Got it. So again, back to Dr. Wells' comment earlier, this is clearly a theme of the evening, I think it's been identified several times. Everybody gonna come up again. Yeah. So it's being joked.
We saw the spleen floating and blood on the ultrasound. Let's try it twice. No. And somebody has to say that.
Thank you. Nancy, I think I don't want to okay, great. So moving further into this end of the room.
One of the things I think Miranda mentioned was that it was very easy to speak up, very comfortable, the water was warm, there was no nervousness there, that if you had a thought, you felt free to say it.
I find that the chaos that happened in the trauma room, I felt like it felt pretty normal, like it felt pretty real. When you get a bunch of different doctors in the room, though, it's really hard to know who you're taking orders from. You hear a lot of side conversations and stuff, but then someone hears it, someone speaks up about it, and that adds to more of the chaos. But there was a few times where it's just like, okay, who are we taking orders from? Are those orders going to the medication nurse? And how are we doing that close loop communication?
Thank you. Moving down into this group here.
We talked about the process, MHP process. We talked about just maybe coming together with a small group or big emerge group and just identifying the steps. I think aside from the STEM stuff, just the understanding. And Joe should have had to like chart and order. Like, so.
I think that it came to light, not just this time, but it seems like every time, Mark's point of we often wait for blood, but is part of that because we don't understand the MHP protocol well and aren't doing it right. So I think there needs, I agree, Janet had suggested that we do like a kind of an education session so everybody understands the steps in a way that the next time we order it, it's very clear. These are the steps that happens. You, clerk knows what she's doing, is doing, nursing knows what they're doing, physician knows what their roles are, and some of those questions come up because every single time, even when I had Dr. Barry on the phone, I was like, okay, so you've got fresh frozen, you've got plasma thawing, you're sending it to me? He's like, no, you have to order it.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I look forward to hearing how that goes. I would just add, we did iterate really as well as we could when we created this thing, role by role, who does what. And one of the crucial roles wasn't in attendance this evening. We didn't have a charge nurse. So I hear you do wait for blood in the real world. I'm hearing that. But this evening, in addition to the technological issue, you didn't have a charge nurse who plays a fundamental first step. Didn't happen this evening. That said, others, as we work down the room, we're almost going to be on time. It's going to be amazing.
So I just want to add to what Miranda said and what has been mentioned a few times, that we didn't have enough nurses around the room. Acknowledging what Darren has said, we had 4 emerge nurses in the room. That is half of our baseline staff. You're not going to get much more than that in terms of emerge nurses. Most times, if there's an MHP, that's about what you're going to get. So we need to be able to have that process in place, and we need to have that role clarity. I know there were times when I was observing where ICU was more at the bedside and less at the ranger, and where there was opportunities where our emerge nurses could be utilized better at the bedside doing delegated tasks from the physicians and from the other parts of the group. So we all went in with our defined roles, and we all knew ICU runs a ranger, and we have a bedside nurse, and we have a charting nurse, and we have an emerge nurse, and that sort of thing. But then we weren't utilizing those people in that way. And that's the entire team's responsibility. That falls on the nurses, that falls on the physicians, that falls on the unit clerks, that falls on everybody in the room needs to know what everybody's job is and then be able to communicate through to those people. So I think that that's something where we can not write off everything as part of this SIM, but recognize that we do have limited human resources. And sometimes we have an excess of humans, but we don't have the right ones or the people with the right skills doing the right thing. So we just need to be really clear about, if you're not actively involved, step back and be quiet. If you don't have any important role in that, and that way it'll clear up some of the mud and you'll be able to see who's doing what and where the gaps are. So I think that so often we boil back down to the roles. And I don't know if there's any thoughts on what in this exact circumstance we could have done differently, any gaps. Like I always like to take SIM to the point of not just calling out where the opportunities are, but how we could do them. Does anyone have any?
What I'm gonna hear from that is, we have roll cards for the roles in Emerge. I do not think though, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we have roll cards for what ICU does when they arrive in Emerge. I don't think that's as clearly articulated in, it might be in the ICU, but I don't know if it's in the Emerge.
No, it's not in the Emerge.
So there's an opportunity there to adjust that, Tony, the role clarity could be adjusted for roll cards in Emerge, like we have for everyone.
So we don't have roll cards in ICU.
Were we out of like role context or like, is there feedback for ICU?
No, this isn't a critique, right? This is everybody was moving in all sorts of different places. There was lots of movement this way, and I think that having people designated to be the bedside nurse and knowing that they're going to have a role at the bedside and they're going to be touching the patient and assessing the patient and feeding that out and that sort of thing. So making space for that and delegating that task so physicians are free to do other things. You don't need to have, you know, all of the physician crowding at the bedside. The physician can stand back and have that situational awareness. And so I think there's opportunities for all of the members of the team to critically look at what they're expected to do and are they doing that.
Thank you.
I do think on that note, and it looks like it's our turn anyways, that it, you know, as a physician, I know the Emerge nurses. I know them pretty well. I think I know everyone. I don't know a lot of the ICU nurses. And so I would find it a lot easier if I knew that in this situation, the ICU nurses would not be at the bedside and would be running the ranger and would not be trying to get involved in bedside care in doing the other things or getting in the action from that point of view. I realize sometimes we might need them, but in this situation, I think it would be a lot easier to know that they got the ranger, they're doing that. Bedside is still
our expectation. That is what our job is when we go to the department for that.
And what did you guys think?
So one other point on, because I want to hand it over to Brian, but one other little point about the lab. There was, and this has come up before with massive transfusion with the lab, is that repeated, like one after another phone calls to the lab, say, where's the blood, where's the blood, where's the blood, massive transfusion, where's the blood, where's the blood, where's the blood, just actually makes it take longer because they're answering the phone call, talking to you, rather than getting you the blood. So yes, we need to call them and say, where's the GB blood? We need it now. But if you keep calling them, they can't get you the blood. So Sherry got asked by like 6 different people to call the blood bank back and ask them where the blood was. And I actually had to tell her, don't call them because they couldn't get you the blood. So just something to be aware of.
Thank you. Nancy, do you want to comment on that or?
No, I probably would really appreciate the first call.
Yeah. First call, it was a missing call, that wasn't called. So the other calls are, yeah, thank you.
So we talked about 3 things. One was the handing off the baton, and I'll get to that in a second, but the primary thing that we talked about was kind of the communication piece in the trauma bay, in the OR, and so on. You can be an intimidating situation because there's so many people, there's a lot going on, but no one should be intimidated, right? No one should be intimidated. So if you as a nurse, you're like, who the hell am I getting orders from? You say to the room, who the hell am I getting orders from? Is it you, Dr. Pinot? Is it you, Dr. Pariser? Right? There should be no, the ego is at the door. I know that as soon as Dr. Pariser walks into the room, big voice, big presence, he's going to be at the head of the bed. That's awesome. I am not going to try and drown out Dr. Pariser. But I've never known Dr. Pariser, if I look in the eyes and say, Mike, you got to get the patient to the OR. I've never heard him hear a good idea and say, that's crazy talk, right? He always accepts a good, so there should be no intimidation, not at all, even from, is Dr. Jacobson doesn't talk loud like Dr. Pariser, but when Dr. Jacobson talks, you listen. Don't look in his eyes because you melt a little bit, but you listen. Okay? So there should be no intimidation. Nurse, RT, anesthesia assistant, anesthesia at the bedside, TTL, whatever, there shouldn't be the intimidation, it should be the communication nice and loud. Okay. The second bit is how we think about our roles. So in the emergency department, holy cow, bad trauma, what's killing the patient right now? Haha, I found the hemothorax, we've taken care of that. Haha, blood in the belly, that's what's killing. Now I need to hand that off. I need to hand that off, right? There's still time, there's stuff going on. I'm gonna keep doing what I can do. I'm gonna get another IV, I'm gonna get a nurse for the Foley catheter, I'm gonna finish my secondary. No. I'm handing it off to the OR team. The OR team is taking the ball and running with it, or baton, we're running around the second lap of the 400, whatever. We're in the OR team is packing the belly, communicating with anesthesia. What are we doing? We're not just doing because we can do, we understand that this is part of a damage control resuscitation. There's not a damage control surgery, there's not a first part stabilization, it's a whole continuum process. And then you're bringing the patient to the ICU and it goes around and around until that patient stabilizes. So thinking about things as a damage control resuscitation, if you're going to Google anything or look up any research on any part of this tonight, damage control resuscitation is what you're looking at. It's an entire process from the patient comes in the door to into the ICU. Sorry.
I find that very interesting, and I'm not very familiar with the concept of saying, or I think it would be nice if I say, I was leading. Now Mike is here, and we're going to OR. He's leading.
Yes.
Like a leader transfer.
Yes, and you know what? You know how you say that? Exactly the way you just said.
Yeah, but I mean,
exactly.
We don't do that enough.
But so just speak up, and that's why it's great. Yeah.
In general, we don't do that.
Yeah, and we're gonna start. And then the third thing is when we've heard a lot about waiting for the blood, and we've heard about should I give the pressors or should I start the fluid or whatever. So we know from lots of data over lots of years, over lots of resuscitations, crystalloid is bad. Crystalloid is bad, and you don't do something bad because you've got nothing else to do. It's really hard to do, but you got to sit on your thumbs. You got to sit on your thumbs, and you're like, I've given 500 cc's of crystalloid. Great. This patient needs blood because they're bleeding, so I'm not going to give them more salt water. I'm not going to do that. And you're going to sit on your thumbs. And you're going to sit on your thumbs. And you're going to say, the pressure is 80 over 60. Great. Can somebody feel a pulse? Yes. Because what map are you titrating to? What's the map? What's the map? What's that? So you're exactly, you're going to perfusion. It's not 65, some arbitrary number from septic shock. Is the patient septic? No, it's hemorrhagic shock. So you're titrating to perfusion. So I don't care if the blood's not there and the pressure is 70 over 40. Do you have a femoral pulse? You've got a femoral pulse, you're still perfusing. If it's 60 over 20, I'm starting to get a little bit worried. How's that femoral pulse? Oh, it's a little bit thready. Can you feel it carotid? Great. You can feel it carotid. That's good. If you're going to start anything at that point, maybe a little bit of pressor. Maybe to do something if you're still waiting. But that patient really shouldn't be waiting. They should be on the gurney going to the OR.
Well said. We've got quite a bit of time left, about 2 minutes. Thank everybody. Thank you very much. And please, the 2 minutes that you have, we really want to hear your thoughts. What do we need to do differently? Et cetera, et cetera. They're on the table. We have pens and just thanks.
For the physicians, you're going to get emails, CME information for how to submit your CME stuff. So,
thanks, guys, for great STEM. That's awesome. Good job.